This story tells of Angie, who lived on Cullinan Island. Angie revealed a profound secret. Behold, we possess a secret unparalleled in this world. Only until the final purification, when the noble blood is shed, will we embrace transformation. Those who endure to the very end shall attain eternal, immortal life. This moment will transcend eternity, and eternity itself will be blessed. She shared her excitement about receiving her first invitation to the Duke's mansion. Angie's mother asked if she was ready, and Angie affirmed that they could depart now. Angie described Cullinan Island as her home, a paradise cultivated by war survivors. These survivors, hailing from the mainland, had transformed the island into a rich land, with lush forests and rolling blue waves. The island housed people of diverse races, living in harmony, united under the faith of Kylek. Angie had moved to Cullinan Island with her parents when she was young, holding no memories of the mainland, but she felt no regret, for she deeply loved the island. She considered it an ideal place, all thanks to the Duke and his family. Angie rode in a carriage to meet Lord Kylek, nervously placing her hand on her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. She marveled at the Duke's luxurious carriage, scarcely believing she was invited to keep Lord Kylek company. Kylek resided in Blackwell. The sole heir of the Blackwell family and ruler of Cullinan Island, he was confined to the mansion due to a prolonged illness. Angie's mother explained that Angie was to visit Lord Kylek weekly to provide companionship, warning that his illness might make him sensitive or unkind. Despite this, Angie remembered her family's gratitude towards the Blackwell family. Arriving at the palace, Angie nervously hoped Kylek would like the gift she had prepared. The housekeeper, Louise Dunst, greeted her warmly and led her inside, informing her that the young master awaited. As Angie stepped into the palace, she was captivated by its opulent and elegant interior, feeling as though the place belonged to another world entirely. Angie paused before an empty picture frame, surmising it must be reserved for Lord Kylek, as there was no portrait of him yet. She imagined his appearance, guessing he might possess blue-gray eyes like Duke Edward Blackwell. Suddenly, Louise called her name, startling Angie. As Angie turned, Louise instructed her to follow, but before proceeding, Louise explained a few rules. Angie was told that due to Lord Kylek's condition, she would not be able to see his face. Louise emphasized that if anything unusual occurred, Angie must call for help immediately. Furthermore, she was to answer only the questions asked of her, avoiding unnecessary comments. Under Louise's meaningful gaze, Angie nervously agreed, though she didn't understand the look. Angie knocked on Kylek's door, greeting him before entering. Stepping inside, she was taken aback by the sight of the room, silently observing the details. Louise introduced Angie to Kylek, who was hidden behind a large curtain. However, Kylek angrily interrupted the introduction, reminding Louise of his explicit prohibition against any visitors. Angie was shocked, unsure why he didn't want visitors, despite the rumors of his long-term illness and the treatment chemicals that had left his face supposedly gruesome and frightening. Kylek irritably assumed Louise had brought Angie at his father's behest. Despite his anger, he grudgingly forgave Louise for this transgression, but warned her not to repeat it. Louise apologized and whispered to Angie, encouraging her to proceed with the purpose of her visit. Angie stood frozen, nervously hesitant, unsure if she could truly remain. She recalled her mother's words about their family's debt to the Blackwells, but anxiously wondered what she would do if Kylek sent her away. Kylek ordered Angie to come closer, but not too close, and have a seat by the window. Angie quietly obeyed. Then Kylek asked for her name. She introduced herself as Angela Resdell, Angie for short, and explained that her family were the keepers of the North Shore cottage. When Kylek asked her the reason for her visit, Angie replied that she was honored to be in his company. Inwardly, she worried he might find her stories dull, but since he had allowed her to stay, she decided to share the tale she had prepared. Angie told Kylek she had come to tell him stories. When Kylek questioned this, she explained they were stories born from her imagination, and asked if he would like to hear them. Angie recalled the Blackwell family's invitation, pondering her own skills and passions. While she enjoyed reading and was skilled in sewing and embroidery, she doubted her lacework could impress a nobleman accustomed to luxury. Similarly, she reasoned that Kylek, in his confinement, had likely perused a vast library far exceeding her own humble collection, rendering her knowledge inadequate. Yet, Angie imagined that even Lord Kylek might have moments where, on a sun-drenched afternoon, he would close a book, gaze out the window, and see the clouds form the very scenes he had just read. Perhaps in those moments, he longed to share that experience with someone who possessed a similar imagination. Angie wondered if this shared imagination was the reason she, of all the children on the island, had been chosen to be his companion. Angie explained to Kylek that some of her stories might be familiar, while others would have endings she had imagined herself. She invited him to share his thoughts and promised to reveal her own reasoning and intentions, assuring him she wouldn't be offended if he found her tales absurd. Kylek, with a hint of sarcasm, remarked that her displeasure wouldn't affect him in the slightest and encouraged her to proceed, warning that if the stories were indeed absurd, he wouldn't hesitate to send her away. Angie confidently agreed, bolstered by the fact that her storytelling had always been well received at the church. She began the tale of the ancient Greek prophetess, the Cumean Sibyl, though her mouth felt dry and her nerves jangled under Kylek's veiled gaze. Angie managed to finish her story without interruption or dismissal. Grateful for the opportunity, she took her leave of Kylek's room, surprised when he requested her return the following week. He bade her a safe journey home, using her name, which pleased her immensely. Hearing him say her name, she thought, meant she had made a good impression. While the initial experience had been daunting, she realized he wasn't as difficult to please as she had imagined. As Angie walked home from the palace, Kylek watched her from his window, seemingly content. Angie, her heart light, pondered what tale she would tell next. Meanwhile, under the cloak of a dark night, Elliot attempted to steal away from Cullinan Island. He recalled his parents' words, reminding him of the preciousness of life. They had told him how Duke Blackwell had taken in the survivors of a terrible war, granting them a prosperous life on the island. A stark contrast to the harsh, hellish conditions on the mainland. Elliot set off in a boat, determined to leave Cullinan Island. He reflected on how stifling life on the island felt, and believed a wider world awaited him beyond its shores. He carried emergency rations and water, confident and prepared for his journey. Leaving this island seems easy enough, Elliot muttered to himself, expressing disbelief that no one had attempted it before. As he approached a large windmill that marked the boundary between Cullinan Island and the outside world, he marveled at its size and anticipated his complete escape. However, before he could cross the boundary, he was struck, unable to evade the attack. Despite his cries for help, no one came to his aid. The scene shifts to a prison, where a man demands blood, while another silently observes him. The following morning, Angie sat with her friends, their needles flashing as they embroidered. As they admired her handiwork, praising the delicate lace, they inquired about her secret. Angie accepted their compliments with a grateful smile. One friend, noticing the embroidered flower, asked about its significance. Angie explained it was a marigold, a stand-in for her name. Her friend remarked that it was like Angie's personal signature. Angie shared her dream of creating clothes inspired by the marigold, her favorite flower. Clothes, she mused, that could bring a smile to anyone's face. Just then, Letitia Durbin, the only daughter of the Duke's administrator, arrived. With an air of confidence, she declared to Angie that one day she would create the most breathtaking garments on Cullinan Island. Letitia added that Angie would be her exclusive seamstress, bound to her and no other. Pulling Angie into a playful hug that made her laugh, Angie told her she was silly. Their easy camaraderie brought smiles to those around them, commenting on how adorable they were. As they chatted, Angie overheard snippets of conversation about small animals found dead in the forest. A prickle of unease ran down her spine. Suddenly, a man came running, sweat beading on his forehead, urgently beckoning them to follow. Onlookers, taking in his frantic state, offered him water. Gasping for breath, he explained that Elliot's body had washed ashore on the southern coast, the news rippling through the crowd like a shockwave. Elliot, the only son of the Hawkins family, who managed the distillery. Murmurs erupted, speculating on what might have befallen him, some suggesting he'd tried to leave the island by boat. Perhaps, they whispered, it was divine punishment for betraying Duke Blackwell's benevolence. They took the opportunity to remind their children never to leave the island. Angie's mind raced, recalling the tragic news, Elliot's attempted escape the previous night, and the fatal shark attack. The sudden accident cast a pall of grief over Cullinan Island, especially for Elliot's parents, who mourned inconsolably for days. Angie had never witnessed such profound sorrow. The next day, Angie encountered Mrs. Hawkins, Elliot's mother. Mrs. Hawkins greeted Angie cheerfully, remarking on the beautiful weather, calling it a gift from God. Angie was taken aback by Mrs. Hawkins' radiant smile, unsure if she had recovered. She remembered Mrs. Hawkins' utter devastation just the day before. Now, it was as if someone had wiped her memory clean. Speaking with Kylek, Angie expressed her bewilderment at Mrs. Hawkins' sudden change in demeanor after her son's death. Could grief vanish so quickly, she wondered. Kylek, hinting that there might be more to the story, poured Angie some tea to soothe her nerves. He acknowledged her shock, then advised Angie to keep her observations to herself. Others, he cautioned, might find her thoughts suspicious. Angie agreed, promising to be careful. Grateful for his advice, she was surprised he had listened to her at all, wondering if he had taken an interest in her. Kylek, his voice laced with a touch of reprimand, told Angie that if she had any common sense, she wouldn't need reminding to keep her thoughts private. Slightly embarrassed, Angie realized she might have been too optimistic. She commented on the pleasant aroma of the tea, noting it was different from the rose tea commonly drunk on the island. Kylek, his gaze meeting Angie's in the reflection of a mirror, offered her some tea, leaves to take back to Louise. Angie, delighted, thanked him. Kylek then brought up Angie's previous story, the one about the priestess Sybil, who wished for immortality only to be cursed. Angie was pleased that Kylek remembered the story. He asked her how she would respond if Apollo himself appeared before her, offering the gifts of immortality and eternal youth. A flicker of confusion crossed Angie's face. She considered the question for a moment before answering that she would refuse. When Kylek pressed her for a reason, Angie explained that while her initial reaction might be to accept such a gift without hesitation, she believed the beauty and meaning of life stemmed from its ephemeral nature. She likened life to flowers, blooming vibrantly until their time came to wither and make way for new blossoms. This cycle, Angie argued, was the natural order of things, and precisely why she would decline the offer of immortality. Kylek inquired whether immortality held no allure for her, and she confirmed it did not. Though she conceded that many might yearn for such a boon, she then turned the question back to Kylek, curious about his own perspective. Kylek, surprised that such sentiments still existed on the island, began to formulate a response when a knock echoed from the door. Realizing her time was up, Angie quickly excused herself, promising to return the following week, and slipped away. A palpable sense of disappointment settled over Kylek as she left. Louise, entering the room, inquired about Kylek's thoughts on the new antidote, wondering if it was a good match. Irritation flared in Kylek's voice. He snapped at Louise not to refer to Angie in such a way, the mere mention of her name souring his mood. He added, with a touch of defiance, that he would never follow in his father's footsteps. A memory surfaced, a conversation with his father, questioning the nature of the antidote. He had asked what became of those chosen to be the antidote. His father's explanation had been chilling. Once the blood chose someone, there was no turning back. The antidote belonged to its master, forever bound. A knot of unease tightened in Kylek's stomach. Had his father killed his mother because she was the antidote? The realization dawned on him, then. The antidote was someone whose life force, their very blood, sustained the master. Until, eventually, they withered into an empty husk devoid of life. It all began with a terrible curse, born from a desire for something humanity was never meant to possess. Meanwhile, Angie and her friends gathered, their conversation inevitably turning to Kylek. One of the girls shared a snippet of overheard adult conversation, mentioning that the Duke had other heirs. Years ago, she explained, Duchess Eugenia had given birth to multiple children, including twins, but all had perished shortly after birth, save for Lord Kylek. The Duchess herself had passed away soon after. The conversation then shifted to the rumors surrounding Lord Kylek's appearance. Letitia mentioned the medications he took, whispering that they made his face ghastly. Another friend added that Lord Kylek usually kept his face covered. When he didn't, he was said to look like a horrifying monster. Coupled with his confinement to the manor and his rumored volatile temper, it was said he beat his servants daily. A frisson of fear ran through the group. The girls exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the rumors settling upon them. Angie, however, spoke up in Kylek's defense, insisting he wasn't as harsh as the rumor suggested. While his words could be sharp, she explained he was actually sensitive and thoughtful. One of her friends, surprised, asked if Angie had seen him herself or simply heard this from someone else. Angie hesitated, the realization dawning on her that she should keep her visits to Kylek a secret. She sidestepped the question, instead remarking on the impropriety of spreading rumors, especially when they lived comfortably under the Duke's benevolent rule. Her friends reluctantly agreed, though Letitia, while echoing Angie's sentiment, admitted that Kylek's face was indeed unsettling. Angie reflected that she knew little of Kylek's appearance, only that he was tall with a deep voice. Despite his initial aloofness, he showed his care in subtle ways. Until now, she had never truly wondered about his face. At first, her fear of him stemmed solely from the worry that he might send her away. But strangely, Letitia's words lingered in her mind. Angie went to see Kylek, but was told he was attending to business in his study, so she doubted she would see him that day. After waiting for 20 minutes, a yawn escaped her, a wave of drowsiness washing over her. She wandered over to the window, captivated by the breathtaking view. Yet, a pang of sympathy struck her, thinking of how Kylek could only admire it from afar. Sinking into a chair, lost in thought, Angie pondered. Kylek, unsure of the true extent of his illness, but harboring a secret wish to stroll the grounds with him. Eventually, sleep claimed her, right there in the chair. Some time later, Kylek entered, finding her asleep. Gently, he draped a blanket over her. His mind drifted to a conversation with Jerome Hamilton, the Blackwell family steward. Jerome had mentioned the whispers circulating in the church, rumors that had now taken root among the island's children. Kylek had remarked that people likely saw him as some sort of terrifying monster. Jerome had reassured him that this wasn't true, pointing out Angie's staunch defense of him. She was the only one who showed such genuine concern. If the rumors were troubling him, Jerome offered to intervene, but Kylek declined, simply asking Jerome to keep an eye on the situation. Kylek's thoughts returned to Angie. He marveled at how differently she thought from everyone else, a quality that both intrigued him and sparked a flicker of anticipation. He found himself hoping, strangely, for Angie's pity. Just as Angie began to stir, her eyelids fluttering open, Kylek softly told her to keep her eyes closed, his hand gently shielding them. Confused, Angie wondered if it truly was Lord Kylek before her, questioning why he wasn't behind his usual veil. In a calm voice, Kylek suggested she return home for the day, as he had matters to attend to. Keeping her eyes closed, Angie obediently agreed. Lying there, she caught a whiff of floral fragrance, realizing that Kylek smelled of roses. Kylek then added that, from now on, he would like her to visit 3 times a week, as he enjoyed listening to her stories. A smile touched Angie's lips. "May I truly do so?" she asked. Kylek's own lips curved into a smile. "I look forward to it," he replied. Angie explained that the North Shore cottage was where her parents served as caretakers, and she went there to help with chores. She also enjoyed the fresh air, the cottage being situated near the northern cliffs, especially cool in the summer. As she observed the blooming roses, Angie realized the harvest season was fast approaching. She recalled how, every year at this time, the Blackwell family would use Bengal roses to create a powder, mixing it with water for the islanders to drink. The roses possessed a delightful aroma, not overpowering, leaving only a delicate, lingering scent. Then, Kylek's words echoed in her mind, his request for her pity. Angie found it a strange thing for him to say, unsure what could have prompted such a plea. The longer she spent at the Blackwell estate, the more she yearned to understand the enigma that was Lord Kylek. When Angie went to tell Kylek's stories, she paused, asking if they could perhaps draw back the veil a little, if it was permissible. Kylek firmly refused, and though disappointed, Angie accepted his decision. She realized he could be quite strict at times. On her way home, Louise brought her some cookies, explaining that Lord Kylek had sent them, knowing Angie's fondness for them. Angie thanked Louise gratefully. As she thought of Kylek, she remembered how distant he sometimes seemed, drawing lines between them. Yet, there were moments when she caught him off guard, and she wondered what his expression looked like as he watched her. Despite the barriers he erected, Angie hoped that one day she would see the true face behind his guarded facade. One day, As Angie strolled through the garden, she felt a presence watching her from the bushes, though she could see no one. Just then, her mother called her back inside. Unbeknownst to her, Kylek was indeed observing her from the hidden depths of the shrubbery. Later, Angie took a carriage to the palace, carrying flowers for Kylek and a story she had prepared to tell him. She thanked the coachman for the ride. The weather being so pleasant, she told the coachman she would walk the rest of the way to the entrance. He agreed, encouraging her to take her time and enjoy the gardens. Angie happily traversed the grounds, making her way towards the palace gates. As she walked, Angie wondered what Kylek would think of the flowers she brought, eager to present her gift. Reflecting on the first time she had walked this path, she realized how much time had passed. Bathed in the warm sunlight and surrounded by the fragrance of blossoms, Angie arrived at the gate and knocked. Louise opened the door, greeting her warmly. Angie politely replied, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Dunst." Angie reflected that, without realizing it, she had turned 18. 3 years had already slipped by. In those years, her relationship with Lord Kylek had undergone many subtle shifts. One day, while telling a story, Angie addressed Kylek as Lord Kylek. He interrupted her, requesting that she call him Kai from then on. Angie happily agreed to the change. As time wore on, during her visit, Angie noticed the late hour. Kylek suggested she have dinner before leaving, offering her a meal there. Angie mentioned she usually only took rose tea, to which Kylek replied that he wanted to give her an extra reason to visit more often. As her bond with Kylek deepened, Angie found herself yearning to see his face. Whenever he spoke, she likened herself to Psyche, tempted to bring a candle to illuminate Eros's features, yet she possessed neither the courage nor the desire to commit such a reckless act. 3 years on, one day as Angie coughed, Kylek noticed, remarking that she had caught another winter cold, just like every year. Angie smiled, replying that this year's cold wasn't severe, just a slight cough. However, Kylek expressed concern, reminding her that she had said the same thing last year, and he disliked her being ill. He asked her what she wanted for her upcoming birthday, as he wished to give her a gift. Angie blushed at the thought of receiving a present, recalling the surprises Kylek had given her over the past 3 years. As her 18th birthday approached, Kylek told her he wanted to give her a special gift to celebrate her coming of age. Hearing this, Angie fell in a deep thought, unsure how to respond or what gift to request. Angie felt that sometimes Kylek seemed to read her thoughts, as if he were looking directly at her. She pondered what she desired, but realized she had always been grateful for every gift Kylek had given her, never truly considering asking for anything. If given the chance to make a wish, she wondered what it would be. However, before she could speak, Kylek's health suddenly worsened. She heard him cough, and, in a panic, she tried to rush to his side, but Kylek stopped her, preventing her from approaching. At that moment, Louise and 2 servants arrived, Louise helping Angie to remain calm. In her heart, Angie silently wished if she could have one wish granted, it would be for permission to cross the distance between them. She longed to run to him, to embrace him, but she still couldn't. Angie went to the church to pray, offering up a prayer for Kylek. She prayed that through adhering to the gospel, he might find peace in both body and mind, and through it, find salvation. After praying, she wondered if Kylek was feeling any better, feeling that her own cold was nothing compared to the suffering he endured. She noticed that while his condition had always been grave, today it seemed particularly severe. Angie hoped her prayers would reach heaven and bring him peace. Leaving the church and heading home, she noticed 2 strangers engaged in a serious conversation. Curiosity pricked at her. She wondered who they were and what they discussed, but she quickly dismissed it. It was late, and she should return home. Her parents would be waiting. Angie made her way back. Upon arriving, a family member informed her that a letter had arrived from the Blackwell estate. Surprise flickered across Angie's face. She wondered what the letter contained, especially when she recognized the handwriting. It was from Kylek. He apologized for not being able to speak with her in person due to his health. He explained that he must now focus on his treatment, but still wished to prepare a special gift for her birthday. He asked her to tell him what she desired. Kylek expressed his hope that when he was well enough to return to his chambers, Angie would be the first person he saw. He closed the letter with a blessing, wishing her God's grace and peace. Kylek was reading in his room when Louise entered and informed him that he needed a blood transfusion. He immediately refused, stating he had no intention of undergoing the procedure. Louise protested, but Kylek sternly told her not to repeat herself. He emphasized that he would never harm a hair on Angie's head. Meanwhile, Angie wrote back to Kylek, expressing her relief at receiving his letter, as she had been deeply worried. She hoped his treatment would go well. No matter how long it took, she would wait for his return. Angie mentioned that she didn't desire any material gift for her birthday, only one thing. She wished to see his face, though she wasn't sure if he would be willing to grant her request. At dinner with her parents, Angie complimented the dessert. She recognized it as being made with strawberries from Mary's farm, remarking that her mother always made the best desserts. Her mother, concerned about Angie's lingering cold, said she should at least enjoy the food she loved. Angie's father encouraged her to eat more, and Angie thanked him. Her mother then suggested she drink some honey water to soothe her cough, and Angie agreed. Her mother expressed sympathy for Angie, hating to see her suffer every winter, especially since no medicines seemed to help. Angie's father suggested rose tea once she felt a bit better, and her mother confirmed its health benefits, explaining that everyone on the island drank it like water. Angie promised she would. Her mother also mentioned hearing that Angie had been teaching the children to sing at the church. Angie confirmed that Letitia had asked for her help. Angie's mother inquired how the children were behaving and what songs they were learning. Angie explained they were mostly teaching the children's songs Letitia had prepared, but Letitia had asked her to arrange some herself next time. Angie was still considering what to teach them, perhaps a song about the sea or the night, and at that moment, Angie began humming a melody. Her mother remarked that she'd never heard that song before, and neither had Angie's father. Angie felt a pang of embarrassment, wondering where she had heard the tune. Her mother, noticing the time, suggested it was getting late and they should prepare for bed. Angie agreed, and her mother promised to make something special for her birthday the following day. Angie smiled brightly, saying she couldn't wait. Later, in her room, Angie recalled the melody she had hummed at dinner, realizing she didn't remember anyone ever singing it to her. Lost in thought, she eventually drifted off to sleep. Angie dreamt she was standing alone. In a vast, open field, Angie heard her name called, but she couldn't see anyone. Suddenly, a figure emerged in the distance, hazy and indistinct, leaving her wondering who it could be. The figure called out to her, asking if she could hear them, if she knew the song they were singing. Just as the figure was about to introduce themselves, Angie awoke. She coughed a few times, replaying the vivid, strange dream in her mind. It felt too real, too substantial to be just a dream. Her mother knocked on the door, asking if she was awake. Angie replied that she was, and her mother told her to come out and see the mountain of presents, including one from the Blackwell family. Angie picked up Kylek's gift, a smile playing on her lips as she wondered what it could be. Angie found a letter attached to the gift, inscribed to Angie, lover of winter and snow. She knew instantly it was from Kylek. In the letter, Kylek wished her a happy 18th birthday, expressing his regret at not being able to deliver the gift in person. He offered his sincere wishes for her happiness, hoping it would last a lifetime. He mentioned his ongoing recovery, asking her to wait just 10 more days and promising a true gift then. He explained the enclosed present was a snow globe, so she could enjoy the beauty of snow all year round, as if it were always her birthday. Kylek ended the letter with a hopeful sentiment. He hoped she liked the gift. After reading the letter, Angie smiled, delighted with the snow globe. It felt like something out of a fairy tale, she thought. She felt the other gifts Kylek had sent were already more than enough, but she wondered if his mention of a true gift meant he would finally let her see his face. Regardless, she was relieved to hear he was doing well. Angie's mother expressed her delight at Lord Kylek's birthday gift. She remarked that it must be the first gift he'd ever given her. She said Kylek must have truly opened his heart to Angie. Angie admitted this was true, though she felt a pang of embarrassment for the previous gifts she'd received, having kept them secret from her parents. Angie's mother then mentioned that Lord Kylek's birthday was the day after Angie's. Angie was surprised, as she had asked several times before, but no one had ever told her. Her mother explained that both Duke Blackwell and Lord Kylek preferred to keep their birthdays private, the Duke disliking any extravagant celebrations. She advised Angie to feign ignorance on her next visit, as it was an unspoken rule. Angie expressed her discontent, saddened that Lord Kylek's birthday couldn't be celebrated like hers, as birthdays were special occasions. She worried about Lord Kylek's illness, wondering what it was and why it prevented him from experiencing the simple joys of life. Angie's heart ached for him, and she couldn't help but worry. Her mother cautioned her against voicing these concerns in public, reminding her that the Blackwell family wasn't like their ordinary family. She explained they carried heavy responsibilities and their wishes must be respected. Hearing this, Angie felt a pang of sadness. Her mother then suggested that if Angie was truly worried, she should pray for Lord Kylek. That evening, Angie wrote a letter to Kylek, sharing that she had a wonderful birthday, filled with heartfelt wishes and gifts. She mentioned his snow globe was the best gift, calling it a gift of eternal winter. She expressed her gratitude and admitted she missed him. In his reply, Kylek wondered if, after his treatment was complete, he would be able to see her fully recovered and healthy. He looked forward to seeing her smile. Angie prayed for Kylek's health and well-being, reminding herself that only 4 days remained. After the treatment, Angie overheard a hushed conversation behind a closed door, leaving her puzzled. The voices discussed the risks of refusing a blood transfusion and the loss of some medicine, sparking her curiosity about whom they were discussing. They decided to speak with Mrs. Dunst, claiming it went against their teachings. Angie, coughing, couldn't understand what it all meant. Angie wondered if the people she'd overheard had left. She noticed someone walking away, a flicker of familiarity igniting within her. She realized she'd seen this person before. Just then, the person turned towards her, and Angie tensed, thinking he was approaching. He greeted her, asking if she remembered him, then revealed his face. Angie hesitated, but admitted she did recognize him. He explained he was there to assist his aunt, the church caretaker. Recognition dawned on Angie, and she mentioned Hester. He confirmed this, and Angie recalled something her mother had told her. She remembered Hester's sister had passed away from an illness, leaving behind a frail son who rarely ventured out. Angie remembered he had albinism, which explained his striking violet eyes. She stared at the man, a connection forming in her mind between him and Kyle's situation. The man, noticing her hesitation, asked if she still didn't trust him. Angie stammered, trying to reply, but he interrupted, offering to escort her home as it was getting late and the night was dark. Angie politely declined, explaining she knew the way well, having walked it often. Bidding him farewell, she coughed as she made her way home. The man watched her go, a tinge of regret in his heart. He murmured to himself, lamenting that he hadn't had the chance to tell her his name. Later, asleep in her bed, Angie experienced the same vivid dream as before. She found herself alone in a garden, hearing someone call her name. Suddenly, the man from her previous dream ran towards her, asking if she could hear him. Angie recognized him, but felt unable to speak. Abruptly, flames engulfed everything, leaving her bewildered. The man urgently warned her to be careful. Angie panicked, unsure where the fire had come from, before vanishing. The man told her they would meet again and implored her not to forget his name. Martin Silva. He seemed to want to say more, but Angie woke with a start, the scream from her dream feeling eerily real. She grabbed a lantern, determined to investigate the source of the sound, convinced it had come from a specific direction. As she ventured into the night, strange noises startled her, unsettling her nerves. She wondered if it was a beast, but the thought that it might not be a beast deepened her fear. Her apprehension was confirmed as she detected movement in the bushes. Startled, she dropped her lantern. Trembling, Angie noticed a shadowy figure watching her. She quickly retrieved the lantern and stood, only to see a large shadow rushing towards her. Suddenly, a man stood before her. His clothes were stained with blood. The shocking sight caused her to faint. It was Kyle, who caught her before she fell. Kyle held her gently, contemplating how to give her the birthday gift he had prepared. Reflecting on the situation, Kyle realized his father must have finally indulged his dark desires. He wondered how Angie had ended up in such a dangerous place, knowing the forest and the entire island were fraught with peril. Kyle became determined to keep her safe, urging her to hold on. His resolve hardened as he vowed to break the curse that bound them with his own 2 hands. The next morning, Angie awoke, calling for her mother. Her mother bustled into her room, cheerful and bright, explaining that she was just about to wake her. Angie, bewildered, asked how she'd gotten home last night. Her mother's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, Angie?" she asked, Angie pressed, asking if her mother knew she'd been out during the night. A flicker of worry crossed her mother's face, but she denied hearing anything unusual. Angie's confusion deepened as her mother explained that there was no sign she'd left at all. "Your boots are perfectly clean, and the front door was bolted shut," she pointed out. "You were sleeping soundly in your bed when I checked at dawn," she said, dismissing it as a bad dream. She urged Angie to forget these strange thoughts and join her for breakfast. But Angie, speaking more to herself than her mother, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She didn't believe everything she'd experienced last night was just a dream. She vividly remembered seeing someone in the forest, a man of indescribable beauty. In the dream, the man standing in the green meadow, calling the name Martin Silva. She murmured the name to herself, lost in thought. "Did you say something, dear?" her mother asked. Angie quickly shook her head. "Nothing, mother," she lied, deciding against sharing her strange experiences, knowing it would only make her seem more peculiar. Instead, she resolved to investigate on her own, to uncover whether Martin Silva was real or a figment of her imagination. Her mother suggested some fruit and offered her rose tea, noting that her cough seemed better. Angie politely declined, preferring honey tea until she was fully recovered. Her mother then mentioned Lord Kylek's steadily improving health, the news bringing a flicker of joy to Angie's face. She was further relieved to hear that the development of a new medicine was nearing completion. Silently, Angie hoped her prayers were being answered. She longed to speak with Kylek again, even just to hear his voice. A court messenger arrived at Angie's home, explaining to her parents that with several maidservants down with influenza, they desperately needed extra help with the estate's annual spring cleaning. As he made his request, he discreetly slipped Angie a letter from Kylek. After the messenger assured them Angie could return the following evening, her father agreed, mentioning that Angie had almost recovered from her cold. Curious, Angie opened the letter, finding a message from Kylek. He expressed his wish to give her one last birthday gift, asking her to meet him that evening at the General's Garden. Joy fluttered in Angie's chest at the prospect. The court messenger inquired if Angie felt well enough to go, and she readily agreed, assuring him of her willingness to help with the cleaning. Secretly, she tucked Kylek's letter away, keeping it from her parents. Soon after, Angie boarded the carriage with Zachary, clutching the letter tightly. She pondered the mounting web of lies, rationalizing that this was the only way she could see Kylek. As the carriage approached the General's Garden, Angie recalled its history, a sanctuary built by Duke Blackwell for Lady Eugenia. A mixture of nervousness and anticipation filled her as she thought about seeing Kylek in this beautiful place. Upon arriving, Angie gasped, recognizing Kylek standing before her. He was the man from the forest. Kylek greeted her warmly, confirming her suspicions. Still stunned, Angie breathed his name, Kai. The pieces clicked into place as the truth dawned on her. The mysterious figure she'd encountered in the woods was indeed Kylek. Kylek explained to Angie that it was he who had found her in the forest and carried her home after she fainted from shock. He reassured her that her parents were unaware of her escapade, as he had erased all traces of her presence, including her footprints in the snow and returning her cloak to its proper place. Kyle asked her what had initially brought her to the forest. Angie confessed that she'd heard a strange noise and, in turn, inquired whether the same had lured him there. Kyle revealed that he too had been awakened by an odd shriek, later learning from Jerome that it was the weather vane malfunctioning. He found it peculiar that no one else had come to investigate, save for Angie. Angie considered that the sound could indeed have originated from the weather vane, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the shriek had sounded distinctly human. Kyle gently placed his hand beside Angie's, asking if she liked her birthday gift. A blush crept up Angie's neck as she recalled the countless times she'd tried to picture his face. She had heard countless rumors about him, but none had prepared her for such striking handsomeness. Kyle then asked if he could move closer, assuring her she could push him away if she felt uncomfortable. At her silence, he took her hand. A wave of emotion washed over Angie as she silently acknowledged the depth of her longing for him. In that moment, Kyle leaned in and kissed her. Angie's heart hammered against her ribs, her thoughts consumed entirely by the sensation of his lips on hers. Overwhelmed by the sweetness of his breath and the euphoria that coursed through her, she confirmed to herself that this moment was, indeed, real. She could scarcely believe she had just kissed Kyle, the sole heir to the Blackwell family. Noticing her dazed expression, Kyle asked if she was all right. Angie admitted she wasn't, but quickly explained that it had nothing to do with him. She confessed that while she desired this connection as much as he did, the disparity in their social standing troubled her. Kyle dismissed her concerns, holding her hand and expressing how precious she was to him. Meanwhile, an unknown individual spoke with Jerome about Kyle, emphasizing the boy's importance above all else. This person declared their sole desire was for Kyle to live and thrive, urging Jerome to spare no expense, be it new medicines, witchcraft, or any other remedy, to ensure Kyle's survival. Kyle reassured Angie that if her feelings were different, he would understand. However, Angie tightened her grip on his hand, confessing that she reciprocated his feelings. She admitted she had waited for this moment for a long time, praying each night, envisioning the day they would stand face to face. She yearned to look into his eyes and speak with him, eagerly anticipating this very day. Despite this, Angie expressed her hesitation about their closeness, citing her humble origins. To this, Kyle revealed that his late mother had also been a commoner, the daughter of his father's piano tuner, implying that the difference in social standing held no significance for him. Angie was taken aback by Kyle's revelation, admitting she had always assumed his late mother hailed from a family of equal standing to the Blackwells. Kyle knelt on one knee, making his intentions clear. He assured Angie that his status as a Blackwell should not hinder their relationship, emphasizing that he desired only an answer from her heart. Angie's heart pounded as she considered her feelings, realizing she couldn't deny the yearning within, for her heart beat uncontrollably in response to his words. Mustering her courage, Angie confessed her love, confirming that she felt the same way. With newfound boldness, she expressed her willingness to embrace their connection. Overjoyed by Angie's heartfelt confession, Kyle couldn't help but pull her close, whispering her name softly. Meanwhile, in the distance, Martin Silva, the mysterious figure from Angie's earlier dream, suddenly awoke from his sleep with a cry. Startled, Martin recounted the vivid dream he had just experienced, muttering to himself about the blonde girl who had been appearing in his dreams lately. She was with Kylek Blackwell, the memory of their first encounter in her dream flashing before her eyes. Martin recognized him as the heir to the Blackwell family. A wave of disquiet washed over him as he struggled to make sense of it all. The recurring dreams of a girl he'd never met, the connection to Kylek Blackwell, the Empire's recognition of Kylek as a figure of the official religion, the events unfolding on Cullinan Island, it all swirled in his mind. Doubt gnawed at him, questioning whether his dreams held any truth or were merely figments of his imagination. Conflicting emotions warred within Martin. Were these recurring dreams and strange coincidences mere chance, or a call to destiny he couldn't ignore? Meanwhile, Kylek, his brow furrowed with concern, apologized to Angie. He explained that he needed to continue his treatments for a while longer. The development of the new medicine was still ongoing, subject to trials and setbacks, meaning they might not be able to see each other for some time. Angie, her voice soft and reassuring, told him she understood and that she would be all right. Later, alone in the library, lost in thought, she whispered to herself, wishing only for Kylek's recovery. Suddenly, she jolted, a blush rising in her cheeks. Hoping no one had overheard her vulnerable, private moment, Angie replayed Kylek's words about the treatment, reassuring herself that it wouldn't take too long this time. She just needed to be patient and not succumb to anxiety. Her thoughts then drifted to Martin Silva, the mystery surrounding him deepening. Angie realized his name wasn't in her birthday book, but she was certain he wasn't a figment of her imagination. For the first time, she felt a tangible link between her dreams and reality, suspecting he might be someone living on the island. The librarian informed Angie that no name resembling Martin Silva appeared in the resident registry for the past 20 years, a registry that included everyone who had ever lived on the island. Stunned and disheartened, Angie double-checked, only to receive the same answer. She examined the registry herself, finding no mention of Martin Silva. Bewilderment clouded her mind. What did this mean? How could a man she'd never met appear in her dreams? Doubts about his very existence began to creep into her thoughts. She even entertained the unsettling possibility that he might be a ghost. The thought startled her, and she turned to the librarian with a new question. Had any residents met a tragic end while attempting to escape the island? The librarian, surprised by Angie's question, hesitated before answering. He mentioned Elliot, who had tried to row a boat across the stormy waters, but he assured her that, to his knowledge, there were no other similar cases. He suggested Angie check the death registry for further confirmation. Just as Angie was about to agree, Letitia arrived, interrupting their conversation. Letitia excitedly reminded Angie of their plans to make viper lace. Taking her hand, she urged her to leave. Still lost in thought, Angie decided to check the death registry another day, hoping her dreams might reveal more clues about the enigmatic Martin Silva. As they walked together, Letitia, a quizzical expression on her face, remarked that Angie seemed different somehow. Angie, a little flustered, asked what she meant. Letitia, with a playful smile, said Angie looked more beautiful than usual, pressing her for the secret to her radiant glow. Taken aback by the comment, Angie could only stammer a response. Letitia continued to tease her, suspecting Angie was secretly seeing someone. Angie, her face flushed crimson, denied it, but her thoughts drifted to the kiss she had shared with Kylek, deepening her blush. Letitia laughed, finding Angie's flustered state endearing. Just then, two other girls approached them, inviting them to the sewing room. Angie waved in greeting, but then paused, a sudden wave of anxiety washing over her as she realized something was amiss. She hesitantly asked if there was supposed to be one more person with them. Letitia, puzzled by Angie's sudden question, asked what she meant. Angie insisted that she was certain there was an additional member in their embroidery group, a tall, talkative girl with red hair. The other two girls giggled, teasing Angie, suggesting she might be imagining things or confusing her with a character from a book. Angie grew defensive, firmly stating that she wasn't mistaken. She distinctly remembered the girl embroidering alongside them. As Angie tried to justify herself, one of the girls reminded her of the time, months ago, when she'd claimed to hear strange echoes in the dead of night, dismissing her current claim as another flight of fancy. Angie flustered, about to retort, when Hester appeared, greeting them warmly. The girl's attention immediately shifted, responding cheerfully to her. Meanwhile, Hester cast a brief glance at Angie, a subtle, curious expression on her face. Hester approached the group, inquiring if they were the girls who had been embroidering and if everyone was present. The girls confirmed they were all there, but Hester's intense gaze towards Angie made her uneasy. However, Hester quickly turned her attention to the others and instructed them to return home. Confused, the girls asked if something was wrong. But before Hester could explain, several men dressed in black rushed in, shouting about an emergency. Amidst the chaos, Hester revealed that Duke Blackwell had passed away earlier that morning. The news struck Angie and the others with shock. Meanwhile, in the palace basement, the Duke's body lay shrouded, the housekeeper standing vigil. Kyle entered the room, kneeling before his father's remains, reflecting on their complicated relationship. He thought of how his father, though now at rest, had seemed perpetually lifeless in spirit, much like his mother had been to him. Kyle realized his mother had been both the Duke's cure and his torment, the only person he had truly loved. After her death, the Duke had descended into madness, resorting to desperate measures like accepting any blood transfusions available. Kyle realized this had led to his father's tragic end. He contemplated his own fate, questioning whether he could escape this curse. On a rainy night, Angie sat in her room, overwhelmed by sadness. She pondered Duke Blackwell's sudden passing, unable to believe he was gone. She had heard of his declining health, but never expected it to end so abruptly. Her thoughts drifted to Kyle, worrying if he was bearing the grief alone. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Her mother entered, informing Angie that her father had gone to help with the funeral preparations and mentioning that Angie's help was needed as well, for something similar to the last time. Angie, after a slight hesitation, agreed, secretly blushing at the thought of seeing Kyle again. She wondered if this was his subtle way of summoning her. Noticing Angie lost in thought, her mother reassured her, saying that while Edward Blackwell, the Duke, was gone, Kyle Blackwell, the Duke, had now taken his place. She expressed her belief that under the Blackwell family's guidance, their lives would continue with purpose. Angie nodded, but worry lingered, questioning whether everything would truly be all right. She voiced her concerns, mentioning Kyle's ongoing treatment and the uncertainty of his recovery. Angie's mother revealed a startling possibility. If Kyle's condition didn't improve, he might need to leave the island to seek treatment. Angie was shocked, questioning how such a journey would even be possible given the dangers surrounding the island. She reminded her mother of the shark-infested waters and the lingering toxic gases on the mainland. Her mother acknowledged the risks, but urged Angie to listen carefully. She explained that while not commonly known, there were indeed rare moments when the shark populations migrated. When the full moon deviates from its orbit and turns red, it is safe to cross the sea. 8 years ago, the late Duke Blackwell took advantage of this phenomenon to journey to the mainland in search of medicine. A storm claimed the lives of his escorts, however, forcing his return to the island within a week. Angie's mother added that the late Duke kept this a secret to prevent others from risking the crossing without full understanding of the lunar cycle, lest they meet a tragic end like Elliot. Still reeling from the revelation, Angie asked her mother if the mainland was safe, questioning what she had been taught. Her mother vehemently denied this, explaining that the late Duke only risked the journey due to his desperate need for medicine. She warned Angie against entertaining any unrealistic ideas and insisted she keep the matter confidential. Clutching her mother's hand, Angie urgently asked one final question. When would the next special lunar cycle occur that allowed safe passage? Her mother admitted she didn't know, explaining that such knowledge likely resided only with the Blackwell family's most senior attendants. She patted Angie's hand, suggesting she begin packing as she would need to leave for the Blackwell estate immediately after the funeral. Left alone, Angie sat lost in thought after her mother departed. Her mind drifted to the possibility of leaving the island, a thought she had never entertained before. She pondered what it would mean if such an opportunity truly existed. That rainy night, the Duke Blackwell's funeral was held. Attendees gathered solemnly, offering prayers for his peaceful rest and rebirth. Angie stood with her mother, who instructed her to remain behind as she proceeded towards the burial site. Alone, Angie's thoughts turned to Kylek. She wondered if he would attend the funeral, as he had never been seen in public. Glancing around, she noticed a young man holding an umbrella. Though his face was obscured, something about his features caught her attention. Kylek, she whispered in surprise. The young man turned towards her, gesturing for silence. He approached with a smile, bowing slightly. Angela, he greeted, it has been some time. Angie's eyes widened, noting how much he had changed. He looked almost like Kylek compared to the last time she had seen him outside the church. The young man gently teased, saying he thought she would be more surprised he knew her name. He claimed to have heard much about her, complimenting her embroidery skills and love of reading. Angie blushed, shyly requesting he call her Angie. The young man introduced himself as Mike Hiley Randall, asking her to address him by that name and not associate him with Lord Blackwell. His presence filled her with both curiosity and unease. A while later, Angie stepped outside the palace for some air, sighing deeply. Mike Hiley followed her out, inquiring why she had left. She explained the heavy atmosphere inside and her need for fresh air. Mike Hiley nodded in understanding, standing beside her. Angie hesitantly mentioned hearing about his prolonged illness. Mike Hiley chuckled softly, saying he hadn't expected her concern, leaving her flustered. He explained that it hadn't been long since his recovery and return to the world. Sometimes, even the air he breathed felt unreal, much like the disbelief surrounding the Duke's passing. Angie sincerely expressed her hope that he wouldn't suffer any further and wished him well in the future. Mike Hiley thanked her, mentioning he would be assisting at the estate from that day forward, and that it was comforting to see her there. Angie admitted her limited knowledge of these duties, to which Mike Hiley responded with a humorous reassurance of his confidence in her abilities. As Angie observed him, she considered how different he was from Kyle. Kyle reminded her of a dark chess piece, while Mike Hiley radiated the luminosity of ivory, each possessing a distinct aura. Mike Hiley inquired whether Angie would be amenable to a stroll, and despite the unexpected suggestion, she agreed. During their walk, Angie stumbled, nearly losing her balance, but Mike Hiley swiftly caught her, preventing a fall. He asked with concern if she was all right. Still within his grasp, Angie thanked him in a flustered manner, to which Mike Hiley calmly replied that it was nothing. Noticing something amiss, Mike Hiley pointed to marks on Angie's arm, questioning their origin. A puzzled Angie examined her arm, admitting she had no idea how they got there. She supposed she must have brushed against something. Upon closer inspection, Mike Hiley remarked that they resembled needle marks. To illustrate, he rolled up his sleeve, revealing similar marks on his own arm, explaining that he had many. Angie was surprised to see the resemblance. though she had never received any injections and couldn't account for the marks. Kylek then asked if he could examine her arm more closely, a request Angie readily granted, curious about the peculiar discovery. In the distance, Kyle watched Angie and Kylek together, his expression unreadable. A steward approached him, addressing him as young master, and Kyle inquired how long Angie would be staying at the estate. The steward informed him it would be approximately 10 days. Kyle began to speak about Kylek, but stopped mid-sentence. He simply stated that it was important to adapt, as there would be significant changes in the future. That evening, Angie found herself in the company of a maid named Annette, who had been assisting with various tasks around the estate. Between organizing the library and mending, the two formed a bond, quickly becoming fast friends. Annette cheerfully suggested they have breakfast together the following day, an offer Angie happily accepted. As their work for the evening concluded, Annette bid Angie goodnight. Angie smiled warmly, promising to see her in the morning. Alone in her room, Angie looked around, still unaccustomed to having a space entirely to herself. She wondered aloud if she would see Kyle that day, and though he had sent a note saying he would try to visit, she felt it unlikely. Reflecting on the day's events, she acknowledged how full it had been, from attending the funeral to unexpectedly making a new friend. Her thoughts drifted to the strange marks on her arm, and she absently rubbed them. She couldn't shake her curiosity about their origin. If they were from injections, why didn't she remember anything? She resolved to ask her mother when she returned home. With a sigh, she prepared for sleep. Extinguishing the candle, she allowed darkness to envelop the room. As she closed her eyes, she made a mental note to resume drinking rose tea the following day, as her cold seemed to have completely subsided. As Angie drifted off to sleep, she dreamt of Martin again, surprised to see him, especially since she couldn't recall ever telling him her name. Martin called to her urgently, pleading for a response, even just a nod to acknowledge she could hear him. Though unable to speak, Angie hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Relieved, Martin began to speak in a serious tone. He warned her that the roses grown on the island of Cullinan contained medicinal properties and advised her to avoid drinking rose tea. He stressed that doing so would help her slowly recover her lost memories. He urged Angie to try and remember who she was before arriving on Cullinan. As Angie murmured in her sleep, grappling with the quest to remember her true identity, she startled awake, whispering, a plea from Martin to wait. In her dream, Martin had implored her not to leave, to stay a while longer. Suddenly, she felt a reassuring hand on hers, and Kyle's gentle voice soothed her, asking if she'd had a nightmare. Angie's eyes flew open to find Kyle sitting beside her. He patted her head, noticing the sheen of cold sweat on her brow. Flustered, she gasped his name. Softly, Kyle confirmed his presence, apologizing for entering without permission. He explained that he hadn't expected her to be asleep. Still holding her hand, he mentioned leaving her a note, but having been preoccupied with various duties. He admitted he had only intended to stop by briefly to see her face, but apologized for startling her. Angie blushed deeply, stammering that she hadn't been frightened. Inwardly, however, she was still shaken by the lingering remnants of her dream. Martin's warning about the rose tea echoed in her mind, but for now, she focused her attention on Kyle. He was here beside her. A sense of comfort washed over Angie, and she confessed that waking to find him there had eased her anxieties. Noticing the darkness in the room, she suggested lighting a candle. But Kyle stopped her, saying there was no need, as he wouldn't stay long. He gently kissed her hand. The gesture sent a flutter through her. Expressing her concern for him, she noted that he must be both physically and mentally exhausted. Kyle was silent for a moment, the earlier image of Angie with Kylek flashing through his mind. He reassured her that he was fine, adding that having someone care for him so deeply made everything more bearable. Leaning closer, Kyle spoke softly, his gaze steady on Angie. He mentioned having something important to discuss with her once his treatment was concluded. His voice trailed off, hinting at a conversation about their future. The following morning, Angie found herself distracted, cheeks flushed, her thoughts still lingering on Kyle. She was still reeling from the lingering shock of his kiss, marveling at how easily he made her lose track of time. Her mind drifted towards the possibility of greater intimacy, but she quickly snapped back, chiding herself for such thoughts. As she poured tea in her cup, she noted that it was rose tea and felt a pang of relief that Kyle's treatment seemed to be progressing well. However, she couldn't help but think about his mention mention of a discussion about their future, a topic that stirred a mixture of hope and uncertainty within her. As her fingers brushed the cup, the heat startled her, causing the tea to slosh over the rim. In that instant, the memory of her dream from the previous night surged forth. She recalled Martin's warning that the roses on Cullinan Island contained medicinal properties and that she should avoid the rose tea. He had urged her to recover her lost memories, to discover who she truly was. Angie pondered the connection between the rose tea and Martin's warning in her dream. She recalled that his appearances had coincided with the time she had begun drinking honey tea for her cold. The realization made her suspect it was more than just a coincidence, though she was unsure whether to trust Martin without more proof. She decided it wouldn't hurt to stop drinking the tea. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door, and she quickly called out in response, hurrying away, leaving the tea untouched. Days turned into weeks, and while Angie initially felt uneasy about concealing her decision from others, her resolve only strengthened with time. If it meant uncovering the truth, she was willing to face it head-on, hopefully believing that patience would eventually yield answers. Then, suppressed memories began to surface. One day, while riding in a carriage, Angie was suddenly struck by the memory of a tall, red-haired girl named Lucy Perrin, whom she remembered embroidering with. When Angie mentioned Lucy, the other girls denied her existence, as if all traces of Lucy had been deliberately erased. This bewildered Angie, and she became determined to uncover the truth. Upon returning home, Angie was greeted warmly by her mother. Her mother expressed concern over Angie overworking herself at the estate. However, noticing Angie lost in thought, she asked why she looked so pale and drawn, pointing out the dark circles under her eyes. Even her hair was thinning. Angie hesitated, then shared that she had been experiencing something strange. She described a recurring dream, always featuring the same man uttering the same words, urging her to leave the island. Upon hearing this, her mother was visibly shocked. Angie admitted that at first, she dismissed it as just a dream, but as time went on, she grew increasingly convinced of the man's sincerity. Perhaps, she speculated, there was more they didn't know about the war survivors living off the island. Or perhaps the mainland was safe now. Worried by her daughter's condition and the strange dreams, Angie's mother declared that she would take Angie to see Dr. Johnson the following morning. Angie was uneasy. She recoiled, questioning the necessity, insisting she wasn't ill, just wanting to share her dream. However, her mother sternly dismissed her explanation, urging Angie to stop dwelling on such things. She blamed Angie's fascination with fantastical books for blurring the lines between reality and fantasy, suggesting she stop reading and focus on her embroidery. Her mother's firm words left Angie startled and nervous, unable to reply. Late that night, as Angie slept in her room, her mother crept in, a vial of liquid in her hand. Without hesitation, she poured it into Angie's water pitcher, whispering that they would live happily ever after on the island. Obedience to fate, she added, was the key to happiness. Meanwhile, in Kyle's palace, his steward approached him, asking if he could sit up. Rolling up his shirt sleeve to reveal marks similar to Angie's, Kyle declared that it was finally over. The steward inquired about his health, and Kyle admitted to feeling slightly lightheaded, but otherwise fine. The steward expressed relief, admitting his initial skepticism about the treatment's efficacy, though acknowledging the lingering risk of madness. Standing by the window, Kyle resolved to invite Angie to the palace soon to share important news. Simultaneously, Angie's parents met with an unnamed woman, beginning to explain certain matters. The woman dismissed the possibility of Angie's dreams holding any significance, insisting they were mere hallucinations. She assured Angie's mother that the man in Angie's dreams wasn't real. Angie's mother hesitantly asked if the man could be a runaway. The woman confidently explained that everyone who attempted to escape the island was either caught and dealt with or lost at sea, with no chance of survival. She added that if Angie resumed drinking the rose tea, there would be no further cause for concern. However, the woman pressed Angie's mother, questioning whether Angie had truly stopped drinking the tea because of a cold, or if there was another reason. Angie's mother nervously confirmed it was simply because honey tea was more effective for a cold, assuring the woman they would be more careful in the future. The woman assured Angie's parents she would provide more of the sedative, in liquid form, to ensure Angie slept soundly through the night without any dreams. She instructed them to mix it with water, just as they had done before. Angie's mother thanked her, while her father inquired whether this meant their daughter would be all right. He mentioned hearing that young Master Kyle had ruled out Angie as a potential treatment option before commencing his own. The woman confirmed the truth of the matter, stating that no one could persuade him to change his mind. Angie's father then voiced his concerns for his daughter's safety, pointing out that her blood type was a perfect match for Master Kyle's, but they should still be able to find other solutions. The woman remarked that Angie's parents had developed deep affection for her, practically treating her as their own daughter over the years. This revelation startled them. Angie's mother admitted that, over the years they'd spent together, she had indeed grown to love Angie deeply, describing her as intelligent and lovely, unlike anyone else in the world. The woman then reassured them, telling them not to worry, explaining that Master Kylek wanted Angie safe, and if her memory acted up again, they could simply take the next step, which was to reset her memories with amnesiacs. Wilhelm van Armitage, founder of Armitage Steel and a member of the upper house, was reading a newspaper where he was informed of Martin's arrival. Martin, accompanied by a woman, entered the room and greeted Wilhelm, mentioning they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Wilhelm offered him a seat and inquired whether he needed a merchant ship to the island. Martin replied that he only required a sailboat as a disguise, believing the island wasn't far, adding that any vessel that could sustain them for a week would suffice. Wilhelm assured him that this wouldn't be difficult to arrange, but expressed concern for his safety. Martin reassured him that there would be no danger as long as they didn't land on the island. Wilhelm nodded in agreement, but questioned whether Martin truly believed he could find the girl, Angie, the one he saw in his dreams. Martin admitted he couldn't be certain, but wanted to see for himself to prevent any more victims. Wilhelm, noticing the determination in Martin's eyes, was cast back to the past. A flashback revealed Martin accusing Duke Blackwell of abducting children and taking them to Cullinan Island, manipulating their memories with drugs cultivated there. He compared this to what had happened to Wilhelm's daughter, Bryn. Wilhelm, shocked, denied the accusation, deeming it preposterous. He acknowledged Martin's bravery in rescuing his daughter, but claimed Bryn had simply gotten lost, strayed from the path, and attracted the attention of some petty criminals. Wilhelm, proud of his family's status as a branch of the Trieste royalty, dismissed Martin's accusations against the Blackwell family, stating that while wealthy, they were nothing compared to them. He advised Martin to stop spreading such outlandish ideas. However, Martin was determined to uncover the truth, arguing that the Blackwell family's modus operandi was to target orphans who wouldn't be missed, using them as sacrifices on the island. He reminded Wilhelm of how his daughter, Bryn, had been covered in dirt after a sudden downpour, making it easy to mistake her for an orphan. Wilhelm visibly flinched at the reminder, seemingly feeling the weight of Martin's words. Martin refused any reward, instead imploring Wilhelm to use his wealth to improve the conditions of the nation's children, ensuring they wouldn't be vulnerable to being taken to the island. Wilhelm asked skeptically why the Blackwell family would establish such a secretive organization if their motive was merely farmland or labor. He argued that acquiring land or a stronger workforce on the mainland would be far easier. Martin then introduced a dark ritual called eternity, which the Blackwell family had begun practicing roughly 10 years ago. He revealed the ritual required the flesh and blood of children to achieve something unnatural and forbidden, leaving Wilhelm shocked and bewildered. Angie gave Mike Hiley an embroidered handkerchief. Mike Hiley, deeply touched by the exquisite gift, expressed his gratitude for the kindness shown to him by those at the Blackwell estate. But a shadow of melancholy crossed his features as he remarked that this was the first time she had ever asked to see him and offered him a present. It led him to hope that this was a special gift made especially for him. Angie, oblivious to his nuanced emotions, was surprised to see Michael's downcast expression. Michael then pointed out a small error in his name embroidered on the handkerchief. He explained that while the pronunciation was the same, his name was spelled Michael. Angie, overcome with guilt for misspelling Michael's name, immediately offered to embroider a new handkerchief for him. But Mike highly reassured her that it wasn't necessary, expressing his happiness that she now knew the correct spelling. He then inquired whether Angie had finished her work at the estate. She replied that she believed she had, as there seemed to be nothing left for her to do. Angie recalled her mother's words, remembering she had been instructed to focus solely on her embroidery and cease her reading for the time being. Since then, she had remained at home, diligently stitching, and had noticed that Martin no longer appeared in her dreams. Angie also mentioned her decision to stop drinking the rose tea, sensing that there might be something about it she didn't fully understand. Hester met with the woman to discuss Master Kyle's upcoming inheritance ceremony, which was expected to take place within a few months, now that his treatment was complete. Hester inquired whether Kyle would be traveling to the mainland for the ceremony. The woman confirmed that he would be required to present himself before His Majesty. Hester then brought up the subject of Mike highly. The woman reassured her not to worry, stating that she had everything under control. She mentioned the need to find a new prescription for Kyle in preparation for any unforeseen circumstances. Although Angie's blood was the most compatible, it couldn't be used due to Kyle's vehement objections. At Angie's home, her parents discussed her condition. Her father asked if she was asleep, and her mother confirmed that she was. Her mother expressed her unease about continuing to administer the medication, but her father cautioned her against wavering, mentioning that Madame Louise had said there was no need for concern yet. They simply needed to prevent the situation from escalating to the point where further measures would be necessary. However, Angie's mother voiced her apprehension. She sensed that Angie held a place in Master Kyle's heart that was more than just a companion or servant, pointing to the gift Kyle had given Angie earlier. It was something Kyle had never done for anyone, and she noted Angie's shy smile upon seeing her embroidery incorporated into the dress. Angie's father, understanding his wife's worries, agreed that their hands were tied. He reasoned that it might just be a passing infatuation on Master Kyle's part, and reassured her that, given the weight of responsibility on Kyle's shoulders, he wouldn't make any rash decisions. Meanwhile, Angie, feigning sleep, was actually wide awake and listened to her parents' conversation with a growing sense of dread. She thought back to the days since her return home. Every night, after drinking the water, she would fall asleep unusually quickly. At first, she attributed it to the aftereffects of stopping the rose tea. However, upon discovering the note hidden within the box containing the dress, everything clicked into place. The note read, "My dearest Angie, my treatment is finally complete. Please wear this dress and come see me tonight. Jerome will be waiting for you at the entrance to the forest." A strong premonition told Angie that she shouldn't have drunk the water her mother had given her that night. She continued to feign sleep. Later, she quietly donned the dress Kyle had given her and slipped out of her room to meet him. On her way to the meeting, Angie couldn't help but wonder why her mother had drugged her. Was it because she had mentioned Martin appearing in her dreams, or was it her mother's fear of her growing closeness with Kyle? She also pondered what her mother had actually put in her water and what the cryptic second step could possibly mean. Her mind raced with confusion and suspicion, overwhelmed by the weight of the unknown. A chilling thought began to take root. Were these secrets they kept from her just the beginning of a much larger, more sinister plot? As Angie approached the palace, she was startled by the sound of the steward, Jerome, calling her name. She turned sharply to find him standing nearby. He inquired if she was rushing to the palace, assuring her there was still plenty of time. Flustered, Angie quickly responded, calling out his name. Jerome, noticing her pale complexion, suggested she take a moment to catch her breath, but Angie refused, insistent on seeing Master Kyle immediately. A wave of nervousness washed over Angie as she reached the palace, but the moment she saw Kyle, all her anxieties seemed to melt away. He greeted her with an enthusiastic smile, and as Angie looked at him, her earlier apprehension gave way to a profound sense of relief. Overjoyed to see him looking healthier than before, she asked if he had fully recovered. She inquired if this meant his suffering was finally over, to which Kyle confidently replied, "Yes, I am completely well now." Kyle gently caressed Angie's cheek, complimenting her on how beautiful the dress looked on her, adding that it was specially made. He asked if she recognized the calendula lace. Surprised, Angie admitted that she did. She revealed that she had made the lace at the estate, never imagining it would one day adorn her own dress. She thanked him, expressing her desire to give him something meaningful in return. A faint blush colored Kyle's cheeks as he insisted she call him Kai, a privilege he reserved only for her. Stunned by his words, Angie couldn't help but question his perception of reality. Did he not see what was happening around them? Was he oblivious to how people viewed their relationship, to the secrets that shrouded the island? Angie hesitated, expressing her apprehension about accepting such a lavish gift. Kyle drew closer, gently reassuring her that she deserved it, and more. He confessed that he had been waiting for his treatment to end so he could finally tell her how he felt. Then he asked if he could hold her. Later that night, in her room, they stood half-dressed, poised on the precipice of intimacy. As Kyle began to unlace her corset, Angie flinched, but he quickly soothed her, telling her not to be afraid, that she could push him away at any time. He expressed his desire to share all of himself with her. Blushing, Angie admitted her own yearning to touch him, confessing that despite the weight of the unspoken, the things they should be considering, she could no longer restrain herself. In that moment, all she wanted was to feel his warmth, to be close to him. Kyle gently kissed Angie's body, whispering that he had waited so long for this. Angie gasped, her voice thick with emotion, admitting that she too had been waiting. After that night, they couldn't stop, returning to each other again and again. With each encounter, their desire intensified. The scent of his skin, the warmth of his body, and the sound of his breath filled her senses, making each moment exquisitely sweet and intimate. Even in their closeness, their yearning only deepened, pulling them into a vortex of ever-increasing passion. Meanwhile, outside the room, Michaela stood alone, clutching the handkerchief Angie had given him, a sorrowful expression etched on his face. One evening, Angie and Kyle strolled outside, enjoying the night air. Angie commented on how wonderful the air felt, and Kyle, noticing her earlier fatigue, asked if she needed him to carry her. Angie quickly reassured him she was fine. Though she was indeed quite tired, she couldn't help but notice how sly Kyle had become lately. He put his arm around her from behind, suggesting they take a slow walk, as he wanted to show her something. Angie readily agreed. When they reached their destination, Angie gasped in delight at the sight of fireflies, exclaiming at their sheer number. Kyle, once again embracing her from behind, asked if she liked them. Angie, mesmerized by the breathtaking ocean view, smiled and remarked on how beautiful and unforgettable the scenery was. Kyle nuzzled his cheek against Angie's, sharing the tender moment. He told her that his father used to bring his mother to this very spot before they were married. Since then, Angie was the first person he had brought here. He then reminded her of something she had mentioned earlier, saying he wanted to tell her something once his treatment was over. Taking her hand in his, he began to call her name, his voice filled with affection. Angie, eager to hear what he had to say, felt a whirlwind of thoughts carried by the gentle forest breeze. She momentarily put aside the unease she had been ignoring and the secrets she kept hidden. While no one had taken her seriously so far, she began to think that Kyle might be the only one who would listen and believe her without question. Kyle confessed to Angie that he had often watched her from the cliffs. On the days she didn't visit him, he knew she would be helping her parents at the cottage below. Angie looked down in astonishment, realizing he meant the North Shore cottage. The cliffs overlooked the Blackwell estate. Kyle explained that his feelings for her had grown from that time onward, perhaps even earlier. Every glimpse of her sweet face filled him with a sense of vitality, and he wanted her to share in his joy. Kyle leaned closer to Angie and asked if she would be willing to go to the mainland with him. Startled, Angie hesitantly asked how they would go, as she had heard there were still poisonous gases present. Kyle reassured her, revealing that those claims were false, and many people had already started new lives on the mainland. He went on to explain that his inheritance ceremony would soon be held there, and once he received his title, he intended to settle in the capital. Kyle admitted there was much he wanted to share with her, but had waited until his treatment was complete. Taking her hand and kissing it, he vowed to write down everything that had been left unsaid, hoping she would stay by his side. Angie was speechless, astonished by his words. The next day, while Angie was in embroidery class, a flustered girl rushed in, eager to share some news with the others. She asked if they had heard about the naval ship that had washed ashore, and the other girls confirmed they had. Beaming, the girl revealed that the captain had met with Master Kyle that very day. Meanwhile, at the palace, the captain recounted the miraculous turn of events. He explained that his ship had been swept away by a storm and eventually reached Master Kyle's island, the very island they had been searching for. The captain spoke of the impassable waters surrounding the island due to the dense fog, believing it must have been divine that kept the island hidden and safe for so long. As the girl continued to share the news with the others, she mentioned that the world beyond Cullinan Island was now considered safe, though they would still need to observe the situation for a few years. The girls marveled at the thought, relieved that they wouldn't be trapped on the island forever. Angie, her nerves on edge, continued with her embroidery. A wave of sadness washed over Angie as she overheard the conversation. Thoughts of the mainland filled her mind, and she recalled Kyle's words from the previous night, urging her to consider his proposal carefully. He had promised to await her decision. She pondered the strange coincidence of the ship's arrival, a nagging feeling that fate was at play. The news confirmed everything Martin had told her, solidifying the belief that he truly existed somewhere beyond the island. It also lent more credence to his warnings about the rose tea. Angie suspected the new medication she was taking was the reason she could no longer see Martin in her dreams. Her desire for answers stemmed not just from curiosity, but from a growing need to help Kyle. He had been ill for so long, and she worried he might be unaware of the true events unfolding on the island. Noticing Letitia's pale face, Angie grew concerned. "Are you all right?" she asked. Letitia hesitated, glancing around at the other girls bustling about. Lowering her voice, Letitia asked, "Have you ever met Master Kylek?" The question caught Angie off guard. I don't understand," she replied, bewildered. Letitia seemed to realize the rarity of such an encounter, implying it wasn't something Angie would have experienced. Unease prickled at Angie. Why would Letitia suddenly bring up Kyle, especially with such a fearful look in her eyes? Despite her apprehension, Angie offered her support. "You can tell me anything, Letitia," she said. Overcome with emotion, Letitia leaned her head against Angie's shoulder. "You're the most precious person in the world to me, Angie," she whispered. Angie patted Letitia's back, reflecting on the moment, too late realizing she had made a grave mistake, the severity of which she couldn't yet comprehend. Meanwhile, in the palace, Kyle stood lost in thought, studying a portrait. He spoke to Jerome, the steward, about his mother's reaction upon discovering the truth about his father. Kyle pictured the look in her eyes when she learned the full story, the color draining from her face. His father had truly loved her, but the realization had come too late. "My mother's pain," Kyle declared, "shaped my resolve to avoid such regret." He then addressed Jerome directly, acknowledging the steward's loyalty to his father, but warning of dire consequences should Jerome choose a different path or obstruct him. Jerome bowed respectfully. "My loyalty lies with you, Master Kyle, and with your father's will," he pledged, promising complete obedience to Kyle's commands. Unseen, Hester eavesdropped on their conversation, growing increasingly worried about the unfolding events, muttering to herself about the need to intervene. Unbeknownst to her, Michaela was also secretly observing Hester. 2 weeks later, the announcement of Kyle's inheritance ceremony was made public. He would travel to the mainland with the naval officers to receive his title, hosting a 3-day feast for the inhabitants of Cullinan Island before his departure. Surprisingly, the islanders weren't gripped by the expected fear of the mainland. Instead, a sense of excitement permeated the air, a thirst to explore the unknown. They were particularly eager to finally see the face of their enigmatic duke. Angie pondered this, thinking perhaps everyone had been trying to suppress their curiosity about Kyle and the mainland, because that's what they were supposed to do. She realized it must have been equally difficult for Kyle to manage all these secrets. Just then, Jerome approached Angie. "Angie," he called. She was surprised, but agreed to accompany him, wondering if Kyle wished to see her. Meanwhile, Harold Durbin, the Blackwell family's treasurer and chief administrator, sternly admonished Letitia. He reminded her that mistakes were intolerable, emphasizing the immense responsibility she carried, as the family's future rested upon her shoulders. Letitia seemed deeply uncomfortable, shrinking back from his words. Louise greeted Harold warmly, informing him they needed to discuss a few matters with her before he saw Master Kylek. Harold, with his usual stern demeanor, told Letitia not to stand idly by and to come with him immediately. Looking frightened, Letitia obeyed. Meanwhile, Jerome led Angie to a place that surprised her. Just then, Kyle appeared, calling her name, causing her to turn around in astonishment. He reassured her that she could relax, as no one would enter this space, then embraced her tightly, admitting how much he had missed her. When she expressed concern for his busy schedule, he told her nothing was more important than being with her. Angie recalled their moment together on the cliffside, surrounded by fireflies. His words echoed in her mind, the invitation to join him on the mainland. She couldn't deny the fear that still lingered, but she realized that even before Kyle's proposal, before meeting Martin, even before learning about the mysterious figures interested in the outside world, a part of her had always longed to leave the island. The thought of stepping into a new world had always been a part of her. When Kyle's words reached her ears, the first feeling she experienced wasn't doubt, but excitement. The possibility of going there with him, of experiencing this new world by his side, stirred something deep within her. She couldn't help but wonder if fate had presented her with an opportunity she couldn't ignore. Taking Kyle's hand, Angie pressed her cheek against it, expressing her desire to go to the mainland with him. Kyle, though expressing concern about leaving his parents and friends, assured her that while it might take time, he would ensure that her loved ones would eventually settle in the capital as well. Angie thrilled at his words. Kyle then asked if it was his turn to give something, producing a small box containing a diamond. He explained it was a family heirloom called Saint's Tear, passed down through generations to the women of the family. He told her it was what his father had given his mother, and now he wanted to give it to her. Angie hesitated, unsure if she could accept such a precious gift. But Kyle reassured her there was no one else he could give it to. He explained that he had originally planned to give her a necklace and ring, but tradition dictated they exchange those items during their vows. Angie felt unworthy, expressing her worry about having nothing to give in return, while Kyle came from the Blackwell family, a branch of the Imperial royal family. Before they could continue, Jerome interrupted, telling Kyle it was time to go. Kyle apologized for losing track of time, handing Angie a letter, telling her everything he wanted to say was inside, that would give her all the answers she needed. He promised to contact her soon, and by then, they needed to start preparing to leave the island. He kissed her forehead before departing. Angie clutched the letter to her chest. Whenever she was with Kyle, her heart raced, and she felt as if she were walking on clouds. Suddenly, she heard someone call her name and saw Michaela running towards her, breathless. He urgently told her that her friend was in trouble and she needed to come quickly. Confused, Angie quickly ran towards Letitia, asking if she was all right and expressing concern for her absence from the banquet. However, when Angie reached out to touch Letitia, she recoiled, preventing Angie from getting close. Angie stood there, shocked, unsure of what was happening. Letitia, filled with anger, demanded to know why Angie had lied to her, questioning whether Angie had met Master Kylek before. A sudden realization struck Angie. Remembering Letitia's earlier questions about Master Kylek, she nervously asked if Letitia had come to see him. Visibly distressed, Letitia retorted that Angie didn't understand anything. She didn't know how desperately Letitia wanted to escape. A memory flashed through her mind. Her father, Harold, berating her for her hesitation, fear etched on her face. She was terrified of meeting Master Kylek, worried he would be as monstrous as everyone said. She wondered if it was too late to back out. Harold angrily shouted at her, but Louise interjected, explaining that Angie Ristel had already volunteered for the role. Letitia was stunned, unable to believe what she had just heard. Snapping back to the present, she angrily demanded to know what Master Kylek was like, her voice laced with resentment for Angie's years of secrecy. Angie flinched, while Letitia, overwhelmed with emotion, ordered her to leave, shouting that she didn't want to see her. As Angie tried to approach, Kyle's letter slipped from her grasp, unnoticed. Michaela intervened, leading Angie away and assuring her that Letitia's friends would take care of her. Unbeknownst to Angie, Michaela picked up the letter, concealing it from her. The two left Letitia, neither aware of the significance of the letter, now in Michaela's possession. Angie, feverish and ill, rested at home under her mother's care. Her mother asked if she was feeling any better, expressing concern that her fever persisted even in the height of summer. Angie's thoughts drifted back to the events after the banquet, guilt gnawing at her for not being able to see Letitia, who had refused to meet with her. Worse, she had lost Kyle's letter. How foolish she had been, she thought. Just then, her father entered the room to check on her. Her mother reassured him that Angie was improving but still needed to be monitored. Her father handed her medicine prescribed by Dr. Johnson. He also mentioned a disturbing piece of news. More animal carcasses have been found near the woods, something that hadn't happened for months. He worriedly asked if any had been found on the North Shore. Before Angie could answer, he shared another piece of news, this time about Letitia. At the mention of her friend's name, Angie flinched, still troubled by Letitia's recent rejection. Angie's parents continued their discussion, her father revealing a conversation he'd overheard at church. Letitia was to be betrothed to Master Kylek soon. Angie cried out in shock, scrambling out of bed in disbelief. Trembling, she asked if it was true. Had the Blackwell family formally announced it? Did Master Kylek even know about the engagement? The shocking news sent a wave of dizziness washing over her. Before she could gather her thoughts, she collapsed back onto the bed, unconscious. In her unconscious state, she felt overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. She had thought she and Kyle only needed to move forward. Now, she wondered when everything had started to go wrong. Meanwhile, Martin visited his grandmother, Catherine Wynne, who affectionately called him Philip. Martin kissed her, remarking that it still felt strange to hear that name, having been unaware of it for so many years. Catherine reassured him that Philip was his true name, and there was nothing strange about it. A woman accompanying Martin introduced herself as Bryn, asking Catherine if she remembered her. Catherine recalled Brianna, the grocer's daughter. Martin explained that Bryn was his fiancée and that he had brought her to meet Catherine several times before. Martin worried about his grandmother Catherine's fading memory, noticing how her recollections seemed increasingly hazy. He held her hand, promising to visit more often. Catherine expressed her delight, saying it was wonderful to see Martin and Bryn regularly. Martin replied that he was there to help with chores and asked what needed doing. As Martin performed the household tasks, he reflected on how such simple joys still felt surreal. 9 years ago, he had fled the island, his life hanging in the balance. During his tumultuous journey, he had met Bryn, instinctively knowing he needed to save her. Putting his nightmarish past behind him, they had built a new life together. With the help of Wilhelm van Armitage, Martin had located his long-lost grandmother and discovered his true name, Philip. While working, Martin noticed a framed photograph and picked it up. Catherine told him it was the only surviving picture. The rest had been destroyed in the war. She explained that the people in the photo shared a similar heir, referring to Bryn and Martin's sister. Martin, stunned, asked if he had a sister. Catherine, surprised he didn't know, admitted she hadn't realized. She revealed that Martin had indeed had a twin sister, Amber Wynne. She had been a sweet, lively little girl with eyes just like his. Catherine went on to say they used to love singing a song from their homeland, and she hummed the tune. The lyrics spoke of the beauty of the setting sun, the stars, and the moon, but emphasized that Amber's eyes were brighter than all of them. A memory surfaced of a young Amber giggling, proudly telling him she had learned all the words to their favorite song. Martin had patted her head, praising her and promising, with a smile, to teach her a new one next time. Back in the present, Martin held the photograph of himself and his sister, stunned by the rush of memories. He murmured Angie's name. Bryn steadied him, asking if he was all right. Martin admitted that everything had suddenly come flooding back. Meanwhile, back on the island, night had fallen in the palace. Michaela, his impatience evident, wondered how much longer he had to wait and endure. He declared that matters on the island might soon be concluded. Hester dryly pointed out that Michaela still hadn't broken his old habits, her gaze lingering on his blood-stained cuff. Michaela flinched, quickly hiding the cuff and dismissively telling her not to change the subject. He reminded her that he had feigned illness for years after Duke Blackwell's death, questioning whether it was finally time to reveal the truth. Hester informed Michaela that she had recently spoken with Lady Dunst, revealing that plans for Lord Kyle's engagement ceremony were underway. She added that the order might be given soon, advising Michaela to simply wait until then. As she spoke, Michaela noticed Angie lurking nearby, seemingly on her way to a clandestine meeting with Kyle. Interrupting the conversation, he said he would hear the rest later and hurried after Angie. Hester watched him go remarking that his instincts might land him in serious trouble. Michaela caught up with Angie and, falling into step beside her, asked solicitously if she was feeling better, mentioning he'd heard she'd been ill. Angie, looking dejected, admitted that while her fever had broken, she still felt weak. She confided her despair, recalling how Letitia had completely shut her out since that night. Without any news to update her, Angie struggled to process the revelations about Kyle, finding it hard to believe all the comfort. Though she wanted to believe some things were beyond his control, that everything he'd offered and promised was a lie, she found herself increasingly unable to convince herself of it. As her trembling betrayed her inner turmoil, Michaela approached Angie with a grave expression, telling her that if it were him, he would never leave her side. A bewildered Angie questioned his words, but he cupped her face gently, reassuring her. He would always look into her eyes, offering her warmth whenever she needed it. Angie hesitated, unsure of his intentions, and asked him to clarify. Michaela leaned closer, telling her he could soothe her loneliness no matter what happened, leaving Angie stunned. Just as she wondered if he was hinting at romantic feelings, Kyle's voice cut through the moment, demanding to know who Michaela thought he was. Angie stared in shock at Kyle, who sternly confronted Michaela, accusing him of the absurd notion that he was a suitable replacement, and challenging him for such behavior. Angie instinctively hid behind Kyle, seeking comfort. Kyle issued a chilling warning to Michaela, making it clear he was never to appear before Angie again, firmly asserting his dominance. Michaela, jaw clenched, questioned Kyle's words, asking if Angie truly knew how dangerous Kyle was. Angie was bewildered by Michaela's accusation, but he continued, accusing Kyle of misleading a naive young girl. Kyle looked faintly stunned by the accusation, demanding an explanation, his tone hardening. Sensing Kyle's rising anger, Angie stepped in, calling a halt to it. She warned Kyle of the consequences of his actions, reminding him that he hadn't formally presented himself to Cullen and the people of the island. Kyle, taking in the situation, took Angie's hand and began to lead her away, instructing her to come with him. A nervous Angie looked back at Michaela, offering a soft apology and wishing him a safe journey home. Once inside the carriage, Kyle broke the silence, asking why she hadn't come to their meeting place, admitting he had waited for her every night. Confused, Angie asked what meeting place he was talking about. Kyle asked Angie if she had read his letter. She uneasily admitted she had lost it the very night he gave it to her. He sighed, acknowledging the misunderstanding, and began to explain, but Angie cut him off. She questioned whether anything he said could change the fact that he was to be betrothed to Letitia. Kyle paused, his silence confirming her fears. Angie turned her face away, her voice trembling as she stated the rumors must be true. She contemplated the situation, realizing the inevitability of his engagement. Her thoughts began to race, recalling the wedding venue, the timing of the ceremony, and all the plans that followed, noting how everyone but her seemed happy. It made her feel like the precious moments they had shared were rendered null and void, a deep despair washing over her as she worried her presence in his life would soon be erased. Angie stated firmly that she would return the brooch to Kyle, explaining that the family heirloom should go to the future Duchess. Kyle looked visibly taken aback by her words, demanding to know what she was implying. He eagerly clarified that the brooch belonged to her, and he held no affection for Letitia Durbin. He reminded her of what he had written in his letter, emphasizing that his engagement was nothing more than a marriage of convenience. He took her hand, suggesting they go to the capital together, where they could be away from prying eyes. However, Angie quickly withdrew her hand, her voice sharp and laced with anger. She asked if he was truly suggesting she be his mistress while serving as a maid in his manor in the capital. Kyle implored Angie not to speak such words, assuring her that the scenario she feared would never come to pass. He promised to arrange separate lodgings for her in the capital. There, she wouldn't have to interact with anyone from the Blackwell family, ensuring her safety and privacy. He attempted to explain the necessity of his engagement, but before he could finish, Angie, overcome with emotion, covered her face with her hands. She expressed regret, saying that if she had known all this, she would never have become involved with him. She confessed that if she could have suppressed her feelings, she would never have revealed them. Kyle was rendered speechless by her words. As Angie rose to leave, determined to end the conversation, Just as she reached for the carriage door, Jerome's sudden knock startled her. Recognizing his voice, she froze. Kyle sighed and apologized to her, firmly stating that he couldn't let her leave now, as they still had much to discuss. Taken aback by Kyle's sudden shift in demeanor, Angie called his name in confusion before abruptly fainting. When Jerome hastily opened the carriage door, he faltered at the sight of Angie unconscious. Kyle, maintaining his composure, inquired whether their carriage had been discovered and instructed him to return to the manor immediately. Meanwhile, Martin was discussing sailing plans with the captain. Martin emphasized the need to seize the opportunity when the fog cleared. The captain asked if the objective was simply to locate and approach the island, and Martin confirmed that this was their current goal. He acknowledged the challenges posed by the impending storm, but stressed the urgency of the situation. The captain suggested setting sail before the storm hit, anchoring at a nearby rocky islet, and waiting for the fog to lift before searching for the island. However, he left the final decision to Martin, depending on whether they could withstand the storm. Martin confidently assured the captain that weathering the storm wouldn't be a problem. He was determined to find Angie. Meanwhile, Angie jolted awake, clearly recalling Martin's words that he would come for her. She looked around in a daze, wondering where she was. Kyle, present in the room, calmly asked if she was awake. Angie hesitated, startled, and nervously addressed him, trying to understand how she had gotten there. Kyle approached her gently, apologizing, and explaining that bringing her here was the best way to ensure her safety. He reminded her that many people wanted to harm her and reassured her that she was safe here and could relax. However, Angie grew increasingly uneasy, pleading with Kyle to let her go home. She believed that avoiding any association with him would be enough to ensure her safety. Kyle was visibly shocked by her words. Angie firmly told Kyle that those pursuing her only wanted to prevent her from becoming an obstacle to him. She stated that no matter what he said, she wouldn't change her mind and insisted on staying on the island and continuing to live with her parents. She urged Kyle to return to the capital, fulfill his duties, and proceed with the inheritance ceremony and his wedding. With a sorrowful expression, Kyle apologized, admitting that it was too late now. He confessed that from the moment they acknowledged their feelings for each other, or perhaps even earlier, from the moment Angie entered his life, their fates had been intertwined. Leaving her alone in the room, Kyle opened the door, made one last plea for her not to abandon him, and then walked out. Angie was speechless, unable to comprehend the weight of his words. Meanwhile, Michaela learned from Angie's mother that she had been summoned to help manage the annex of Blackwell Manor. Her mother mentioned that Angie had been called away urgently the previous evening because Lord Kyle needed assistance with his engagement preparations. She revealed that Jerome had told her afterward. Michaela, startled by this news, thanked her and resolved to visit Angie himself. Alone in her room, Angie contemplated her predicament. She couldn't recall how many days she had been there. Every night, Kyle would silently enter her room, his gaze searching for a response she was unwilling to give. She remembered weeping, crying out in anger, but her protests were futile. In her despair, she had even attempted to end it all, but Kyle had stopped her. He had remained close, his head buried beside her, holding the position for a long time. He seemed to weep silently, his anguish palpable yet unspoken. In her memory, Kyle held Angie's hand, revealing the tragic truth of his family's curse. He explained that his mother had been a victim of the curse created by his grandfather, a curse so perverse and unimaginable it defied all reason. His grandfather had called it a sublime miracle. Having witnessed the horrific nature of the curse, Kyle's father initially chose to conceal its existence from his mother, but the secret couldn't be kept forever. One day, Kyle's mother, Eugenia, discovered the truth through records. Grief-stricken and terrified, she confronted Kyle's father. Tears streaming down her face, she demanded to know if the records were true, despairing at how he could have committed such a horrific act. Kyle's father tried to soothe her, calling her name, but Eugenia, consumed by rage and betrayal, pushed him away, screaming for him to leave. In her anguish, Eugenia set herself ablaze, choosing to end her life in flames. Her final words, filled with pain and hatred, echoed through the room. "I will never forgive you, not even in death." Kyle confided in Angie the agonizing past of his family and his determination to avoid repeating his father's mistakes. He spoke of how his father lived the rest of his life burdened by deep regret, a burden Kyle witnessed throughout his childhood. Kyle looked at the mark on Angie's hand, his expression resolute. Clenching his fist, he declared that the salvation she offered him would not be in vain. He implored her to trust him, to allow him to protect her. Afterward, Kyle instructed the maids to prepare easy-to-swallow food, along with warm water and milk. The maids promptly left to fulfill his request. Just then, Louise entered, commenting on Kyle bringing Angie to the manor. Kyle glanced at her, calmly explaining that if he hadn't, someone would have tried to harm Angie. When Louise questioned who would dare do such a thing, Kyle placed a hand on Hester's shoulder, causing her to flinch, and speculated it could be Kylem's fanatic followers, seeking an antidote, or perhaps family retainers who saw Angie as a threat. Louise was taken aback, but didn't immediately respond. Kyle assured her that once the storm subsided, he would leave the island and proceed with his engagement plans. But with one condition: if there were any memory-altering potions within the manor, they must be completely destroyed. Louise was stunned by his demand, stammering a protest, clearly unprepared for such a request. Kyle issued Louise a stern ultimatum, warning that if she didn't comply with the order to destroy the memory potions, there would be no further negotiations. Louise, bewildered, asked why it had to be Angie. Kyle retorted sharply, reminding her that when a suitable antidote couldn't be found, Angie had been deliberately chosen after careful consideration. He pointed out to Louise that she herself had been certain Angie, with her unique life force, was suitable and would be to his preference. Michaela overheard this conversation. His expression darkened as he listened. Meanwhile, Angie sat in her prison room, wrists bound by chains. Weak and nauseous, she suspected it was from lack of food. Her vision blurred, and a sudden wave of anxiety washed over her as she realized a disturbing truth. She couldn't remember when she'd last had her period. Before she could dwell on this, a knock startled her. Fearful of who it might be, she braced herself. To her astonishment, Michaela entered. He looked horrified at her condition, crying out her name. Relief and surprise flooded Angie as she confirmed it was indeed him. Michaela explained that Annette had told him of her imprisonment and asked if Kyle had the key to her handcuffs. Angie pointed to the table where the key lay. Michaela quickly retrieved the key, mentioning that Kyle was currently at the docks, dealing with a ship bound for the mainland. Unlocking Angie's restraints, Michaela took her trembling hands in his, offering comfort. He urged her to escape immediately, promising they could talk later. Though hesitant at first, Angie quickly agreed. Knowing they had no other choice but to flee, Michaela led her out of the room. Carefully guiding her through the manor grounds, they escaped into the rainy night. Outside, under a tree, both Michaela and Angie were drenched. Angie sighed, expressing her desire to continue alone, suggesting Michaela return to the manor. She explained that if she could reach the cliffs through the forest, she could get to the north shore and be safe when her parents arrived. But Michaela insisted on accompanying her, pointing out it was his day off, and she could barely stand. Angie reluctantly agreed, grateful for his willingness to escort her to the north shore. Michaela reassured her he was happy to help. As they prepared to leave, Michaela gently cupped Angie's face, turning it towards his. Angie was surprised by the gesture. Looking at him, Angie listened as Michaela softly said he had something to tell her when they reached the north shore. Michaela brought Angie to a small cabin, carefully wrapping her in a blanket for warmth and promising to return shortly with some tea. Angie nodded her thanks. A while later, Michaela returned with the tea. Angie worriedly asked if he needed to leave, but Michaela reassured her, explaining that everyone at the manor was busy with the ship. He asked how long she had been imprisoned. Angie estimated 4 or 5 days, recalling it began the night Lord Kyle said he would take her to the capital. She had been imprisoned for refusing to go. Michaela worriedly asked what she planned to do now, as Lord Kyle wouldn't give up easily. Angie explained she intended to tell her parents the truth when they arrived. She reasoned that although the island belonged to Lord Kyle, and everyone worked for the Blackwell family. He couldn't interfere if her parents wanted her to stay. She believed he wouldn't dare disrupt the peace of their village. Though he couldn't fully understand his intentions, Michaela revealed a dark truth to Angie, shaking her belief in the peaceful nature of Cullinan Island. He explained that the island and its inhabitants were far from the innocent facade they presented, despite their efforts to make it seem like paradise. Shocked, Angie demanded he explain himself. Michaela explained that the strange occurrences she had experienced were connected to something called the Black Mass. He revealed that the Blackwell family's sheltering of war survivors was a deliberate scheme, as these individuals were cursed monsters. Confused and terrified, Angie struggled to process his words. Michaela shared the conversation he'd overheard from Mrs. Dunstan, how they referred to young residents like Angie and himself as elixirs, while everyone else were helpers working for the Blackwell family. He then unveiled a horrifying truth. A dark ritual called eternity had been practiced since the previous Duke, a ritual that required the sacrifice of an elixir for its completion. Performed for the sake of eternal life and immortality, Angie was utterly shocked, unable to comprehend this terrifying reality. Eternal life at the cost of innocent lives. Angie struggled to believe what she was hearing, but then she recalled overhearing her parents' conversation that night, discussing how blood transfusions were too risky and could lead to the loss of an elixir. They also mentioned the need to avoid taking a second measure. As Angie realized this, everything began to fall into place, including the deception she had been unaware of. She questioned Michaela about the drug in the rose tea, and he confirmed it was opium rose, which caused memory loss with prolonged use. But the adult helpers seemed immune, having developed a resistance to it. Angie then asked how the elixirs were sacrificed, worried about the safety of her friends. She sought reassurance, wanting confirmation that everyone was safe, including her friends from embroidery and those who attended the services. Michaela challenged her belief, leaving Angie uncertain and uneasy. Michaela rolled up his sleeve, showing Angie the marks on his arm, confirming the truth about his previous illness, but that they were all in the same predicament. He mentioned that several of his friends had already disappeared. Angie asked what happened when they were no longer useful as elixirs. Michaela answered uncertainly, suggesting they might be discarded off the island after their memories were wiped. He was certain the Blackwells knew how to leave the island, but had been preventing anyone from doing so, maintaining its isolation. Angie nervously recalled the stories of monstrous sharks and fish killing Elliot, but Michaela corrected her, saying those were lies fabricated by the Blackwell family. He explained that someone had killed Elliot in the wind and mutilated his body. Angie was horrified by such cruelty. Michaela then stressed they had only one option left: to escape together to the capital. It might be their last chance, especially for Angie. Angie hesitated, worried about what would happen if they went to the capital. She reasoned that if Michaela was telling the truth, then Lord Kyle must know about it. She wondered when he had learned about all of this. Michaela, noticing her distress, asked if she was all right. He suggested that if she was worried about her parents, she could make it a condition that they only leave if her parents came along. Once they reached the capital, Angie would have the opportunity to escape anywhere in the world, even across the border to Vinca or Vincentine. Angie asked when the ship was sailing. Michaela told her the original plan was to leave after the storm, but due to some minor issues with the ship, it might be delayed for a few days. He advised her to prepare to leave, trying to persuade her parents, assuring her they would agree if she told them it was Lord Kyle's order. Angie agreed, but insisted on keeping their conversation a secret from her parents, not wanting them to be devastated by the Blackwell family's manipulative truths. Michaela agreed to her request. Suddenly, a noise startled them. Meanwhile, out at sea in the storm, sailors on a ship were shouting for more hands on deck. The ship belonged to Martin. The captain checked on Martin, who confirmed he wasn't seasick yet. The captain, having weathered far worse, encouraged them to hold on a little longer. Once the heavy rain subsided, they would quickly find the island. Martin acknowledged the plan. His thoughts drifted to Angie, praying for her safety, hoping God would protect her. Not until he could reach her. Meanwhile, Angie's parents had returned home. Her mother, surprised to see Angie and Michaela there, asked what they were doing. Michaela hesitated for a moment before explaining that Angie had finished her embroidery work yesterday. Because of the downpour, they had decided to wait it out at the house. Angie's mother then noticed Angie's pale complexion and asked if she had overexerted herself. Overcome with emotion, Angie immediately embraced her mother. Her mother, concerned, comforted her, understanding how difficult things must have been. Angie's father then mentioned they had brought some homemade soup for her to have before bed. Angie's father invited Michaela to have something to eat before leaving, but Michaela politely declined, explaining that despite it being his day off, the Blackwell manor required his presence. He mentioned they needed extra help due to the storm. Angie murmured Michaela's name, startled. He reassured her softly that everything was all right. As he prepared to leave, he told Angie he would visit again another day and advised her to rest well. Angie thanked him before his departure. Angie's parents exchanged a knowing glance. Angie's mother recalled Louise's words, suggesting this might be the best outcome. She believed Lord Kyle would settle in the capital, and Angie would forget him, living a peaceful life with her parents. It seemed like the ideal resolution. Worried about her daughter's future, Angie's mother asked Louise if it wouldn't be better to give Angie the amnesia potion, suggesting that a life under their care might be preferable to one with Lord Kyle, which would only bring her misfortune. Louise agreed, stating she would inform Lord Kyle and urged Angie's parents to continue acting normally. Meanwhile, Michaela hurried towards the manor. Recalling Louise's order to eliminate the target during the thunderstorm, he paused, taking a deep breath, a sinister smile playing on his lips as he muttered, "What Kyle Blackwell desires will never be his." On the other side of the island, Kyle discussed the situation with his captain, asking if there were any other options. The captain apologized, explaining it would take at least a week before they could make a move. Kyle conceded with a sigh, admitting there was nothing to be done. He and Jerome left the scene. Jerome suggested it would be safer to set sail after the storm, but if the fog cleared by then, people might become suspicious. He questioned how Kyle intended to handle the situation. Kyle glared at Jerome, replying that shallow tricks could no longer deceive anyone. Eventually, they would discover they could leave for the outside world, and the elixirs would no longer be necessary. Suddenly, a man rushed to Kyle, exclaiming that the Ristel family had left the manor after meeting with Mrs. Dunstan, and a last amnesia potion was missing from the storeroom. Both Kyle and Jerome were stunned by this news. The man urgently reported that Angie Ristel had slipped out of the annex early that morning and was now at the North Shore. He surmised this could only mean they intended to use the amnesia potion. Kyle was visibly shocked and distressed by the news. As Kyle quickly prepared to leave, Jerome expressed concern, saying it was too dangerous for him to go alone, offering to escort him. Kyle extended his hand to Jerome, taking something from him, then mounted his horse and rode off. Meanwhile, in a basement cell, Michaela hid amidst the chaos. Guards frantically tried to subdue someone, firing tranquilizers to no effect. The struggling figure continued to resist, and the guards, faces etched with fear, yelled for more chains, desperate to restrain them. But as the situation spiraled further out of control, their efforts seemed increasingly futile. The guards assaulting the figure quickly realized they weren't facing an ordinary human. They were facing a monstrous humanoid. With brutal efficiency, the creature swiftly overpowered all the guards, leaving a scene of carnage in its wake. Hidden, Michaela watched in terror as the chaotic scene unfolded. The monstrous being, a ring glinting on its little finger, managed to escape. Still reeling from the shock, sweat slicking his skin, Michaela muttered in disbelief, unable to comprehend how things had escalated so drastically. He grabbed an axe, determined to pursue the creature, his mind racing, trying to anticipate its escape route. He surmised it might be headed towards the forest and the cliffs. Meanwhile, back at Angie Ristel's home, Angie, clearly frightened, urged her mother to leave the island and start a new life on the mainland. She reassured her mother that they could always return if they couldn't adapt. Angie's mother, her voice laced with sadness, expressed her apprehension about starting over on the mainland, mentioning that the capital might already be overflowing with skilled workers and maids, leaving them with little to offer. She longed to remain on the island, preserving the peaceful and happy life they had built. Angie agreed with her mother's sentiment, but felt conflicted. Just then, Angie's father entered, noticing Angie's apparent discomfort. She quickly covered her mouth to stifle a wave of nausea. Her father, his voice filled with concern, asked if she was all right. Angie reassured him, claiming she just felt a little queasy and that some rest would help. Then, Angie changed the subject, mentioning Lord Kyle Blackwell, explaining that he might come looking for her soon since she hadn't informed him of her whereabouts. She stated that she needed to make her intentions clear if she encountered him, and implored her parents to consider her request. She urged them to think about starting a new life off the island. Angie's mother hesitated, telling Angie she would discuss the request with her father. Angie, filled with a flicker of hope, watched as her mother urged her to rest, then turned a worried glance towards her husband, silently conveying her apprehension. Her husband, understanding the unspoken message, gave Angie some medicine, advising her to take it all at once, even if it was a bit bitter. Angie agreed and drank the medicine. Suddenly, a bullet whizzed past Angie's mother, startling her. Before they could react, multiple bullets ripped through the air, peppering the room. Terror seized Angie. She stared in disbelief as she realized the shooter was Lord Kyle Blackwell. Meanwhile, axe in hand, Michaela ventured into the forest and encountered the monster. The creature was revealed to be John Fitzroy Blackwell, the founder of the Blackwell family, who had forsaken his humanity and trespassed into the realm of the gods, transforming himself into this monstrous being. Michaela, resolute, vowed to destroy the creature for the good of all. He charged bravely, engaging in a fierce battle, finally slaying the monster with his axe. Elsewhere, Hester and Louise discussed the unfolding situation. Louise asked where the creature had gone, and Hester replied that it had gone to the graveyard. Louise sighed, expressing her frustration that of all places, it had gone to the graveyard. Overwhelmed by the rapid turn of events, Louise voiced her concerns about the monster's immortality, explaining that it was nearly impossible to truly kill him. She described in detail how even if the monster were shot through the heart or had its limbs severed, it would regenerate. Silver stakes, silver implements, and holy water had no effect. The only solution was to seal it alive inside an oak barrel and cast it into the sea. However, a pain scream from the monster made Louise wonder if there might be another way. Meanwhile, Michaela continued his assault on the monster with the axe, finally setting it ablaze. Louise and Hester arrived on the scene, shocked to find Michaela standing over the charred remains of the creature. A triumphant grin spread across Michaela's face. He explained that at first, his mind had been a blank canvas, but then a vague premonition had washed over him, a sense that he could utterly destroy the monster, prevent it from ever rising again, and with that realization, he had succeeded. Louise admitted to Hester that Michaela clearly carried the blood of the Blackwell lineage within him. She understood their connection now. With a solemn tone, she suggested they offer prayers for their future and for the soul of their deceased master. Standing over the monster's scorched remains, Michaela declared with conviction, "May the creature rot in hell for its sins." It had dared to defy the forbidden, to challenge the sacred ground. Meanwhile, Kyle was consumed by grief, his thoughts dwelling on Angie's predicament. If Angie's parents truly loved her as a daughter, he thought they wouldn't be doing this horrific thing. They had lost their minds, he reasoned, trying to harm her, but he was determined to protect her. Angie and her parents were fleeing their home, but Angie suddenly stopped, a realization dawning on her. Kyle's true target wasn't her, but her parents. She understood this just as her mother desperately declared, that they would never let anyone take Angie away. Before they could act, Kyle fired his gun again. Kyle pointed his gun at Angie, warning her to stay back, determined to stop her parents from administering the amnesia potion. Angie pleaded with him fearfully to wait, but Kyle firmly told her to come to him. In desperation, Angie's mother begged Angie to explain to Master Kylek that they weren't trying to harm her, that everything they did was for her. However, Angie suddenly noticed her mother standing at the edge of a cliff. She screamed in terror for her mother to stop. Angie's mother gasped, beginning to fall in an attempt to save her. Angie's father fell too. Angie watched in anguish as the scene unfolded before her eyes. Kyle approached her, only to be met with Angie's furious cries. Tears streaming down her face, she told him to stop, accusing him of killing her parents right in front of her, demanding to know why he did it. Was it because they tried to stop him from taking her to the capital? Kyle slowly walked towards Angie, discarding his pistol. Desperately trying to soothe her, he begged her to trust him, vowing that he'd never keep anything from her again. Yet Angie kept weeping, caught in the turmoil of her emotions. She thought bitterly about how, after all they'd been through, she still felt the urge to depend on him, a feeling she deeply resented. With a solemn look, Angie said that if leaving Kyle behind on the island meant she could at last find peace, then maybe it was the right path for her. Kyle winced at her words, calling her name in desperation, while Angie responded with a faint smile. She started making her way to the edge of the cliff, determined to end it all. In a panic, Kyle cried out, his voice trembling as he pleaded with her to stop. He lunged toward her in a final, desperate effort to stop her. But as Kyle raced to save Angie, it was already too late. She had leapt from the cliff, suspended in midair. Angie closed her eyes, desperately praying to God, hoping this nightmare would end and she would wake up. She pleaded for an eternal blessing upon her wretched fate, feeling trapped in a terrifying destiny. A memory of the Duke Blackwell flashed before her, revealing his grim decision to defy God for the sake of his family's legacy. He recalled his own words, spoken of pursuing immortality to protect all he had achieved and ensure the continuation of the Blackwell bloodline. He had to transgress divine law, a process requiring the blood of the firstborn, then mixed with a potion which would grant the second son eternal life, the price being a bloodline deeply connected to the family's roots. Kyle, witnessing Angie's fall, was consumed by anguish and grief, muttering to himself about the sacrifice required for the potion, this forbidden secret passed down through generations of his family. This dark knowledge had always haunted him, a burden that would follow the family until their demise. In the present, Kyle jolted awake, trembling with frustration. Jerome entered with medicine and a glass of blood, inquiring about Kyle's well-being and suggesting he eat something. However, Kyle, nauseated by the smell of the blood, sharply demanded Jerome take it away. He then inquired about the search for Angie, expressing his worry as the entire island had been thoroughly searched, yet she remained missing. In the hallway, Louise voiced her displeasure, complaining that despite being stranded on the island for a month, they still couldn't proceed with the inheritance and engagement ceremony. She wished they could find some concrete evidence, a body perhaps, to force Kyle to accept Angie's death. Letitia visibly flinched, asking if there was a chance Angie was still alive. Louise dismissed the idea, speculating that Angie might have been swept away by the storm and rescued by a fishing boat from a neighboring country. Just like Kyle, she explained that the search had been thorough and Angie couldn't have survived. Therefore, she stressed that the inheritance ceremony must proceed within the next month, with no further delays. The same applied to the engagement. Letitia sobbed in disbelief, unable to comprehend why both Louise and Kyle placed so much importance on Angie. Meanwhile, Martin and Angie were having tea together. Martin asked Angie if she was feeling all right, if anything hurt, and Angie assured him she was fine, thanking him for his care. An awkward silence fell between them. Martin attempted to lighten the mood, chuckling that Angie still seemed uncomfortable, considering everything was so new to her. Angie hesitated, then replied that it wasn't about being uncomfortable, but about everything being unbelievable. She mentioned meeting him in a dream, falling into the water, and him miraculously saving her. She also noted with wonder that they looked like mirror images. Martin admitted, somewhat startled, that it was all very strange indeed, but reassured Angie that she would eventually get used to it, as they would never be apart. However, he added that there were important things he needed to tell her. Angie asked, surprised, what they were. Martin nodded, explaining that it was time for her to understand the greed that surrounded them. He asked if she had heard of immortality, and Angie replied that she had. Martin then inquired how much she knew. Angie confirmed she knew about the potion, the helper, and the poppy rose. Martin, she acknowledged this, going on to explain that to achieve immortality, they must have had their blood drawn repeatedly, a process that must have been agonizing. However, Angie countered, saying she had absolutely no recollection of anyone ever taking her blood. She added that what Martin had told her in her dreams had led her to question everything. Martin, with a knowing smile, continued to explain the situation to Angie, mentioning the connection between twins. He suggested that despite their separation, they might be subconsciously drawn to each other through their dreams. Angie, stunned, agreed with him. Seeing that his words had struck a chord, Martin shifted the conversation to their current location, revealing they were in the kingdom of Vingar, specifically in the capital castle. He explained that Vingar had adopted a constitutional monarchy and was undergoing an industrial revolution, a stark contrast to Trieste, which still clung to absolute monarchy. Martin went on to share the political and social struggles of Trieste, including peasant uprisings sparked by King Rainier VIII's greed. He further spoke of those in power who sought immortality, the kings, the nobles, and the wealthy merchants who possessed everything but time, the one thing they craved most. Martin revealed that John Blackwell had also fallen prey to this insatiable desire for eternal life. Angie trembled, a mixture of shock and dread coursing through her. The teacup slipped from her grasp as the full truth crashed down upon her. The firstborn son sacrificed, transformed into an immortal through a blood ritual. The horrific sacrifice was almost too much to bear. She nervously asked if Kyle was also part of this gruesome tradition. Martin confirmed the terrible truth. Edward Blackwell, Kyle's father, used the elder twin as the offering. If Kyle had been born first, he would have been the one to suffer. Angie froze, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, whispering in terror that she might be pregnant. The weight of this realization was suffocating. The panic of anyone, especially Kyle, discovering this secret consumed her. Her anxiety was palpable, but she knew that for her own safety, this secret had to remain hidden. Meanwhile, Kyle confronted Michaela. He furiously accused Michaela of being the one who unlocked the bedroom door in the villa. Summoned by Kyle a month later, Michaela admitted to freeing Angie. He explained that after the creature escaped from the basement, it attacked people, starting a fire that spread to the garden villa. Eventually, it engulfed the entire island. He argued that if Angie had remained locked in that room, she would have perished in the flames. With a sardonic smile, Kyle asked Michaela if he considered himself Angie's savior. Michaela explained that his point was the fire had destroyed countless lives. Cullinan Island was now a wasteland. The survivors were but a fraction of the original population, all gathered at Tay Dam. Kyle, uninterested in the details, offered Michaela money to leave the island immediately. Michaela, enraged, accused Kyle of coveting what belonged to him and refused to leave. Kyle coldly asserted that Angie had been his from the beginning and still was. Michaela then recalled his Aunt Hester revealing that his mother had a strange obsession with Edward Blackwell. She had drugged him at a ball, which led to Michaela's birth. Hester said she had done her part by bringing him into this world,